I think some of like my most regrettable moments are just realizing when I wasn't nice to like people I wanted to be nice to, or like it matters to be nice to everybody, but like your parents are a great example of like, man, if I could take back all the times I said mean things to someone just genuinely trying to take care of me, I don't know, I would take them all back,
Yeah. We're live. Mario, welcome to this show.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a long time coming. And how many years have we known each other now?
Let's see. When did you start?
I probably started
in the privates.
2012.
2012. So yeah, I think 2012.
10 years. But you
Well, 2010. No, I think it was 2012. No,
I didn't get my EMT until late 2011.
I was gonna say I think it was at the end of 2011 because I was already working on the privates before I had Noah, and his birthday is October 2012.
But you were this wasn't in my memory, but you were there before I was.
That's right.
Yeah.
Don't
right?
you forget it.
No, I know, right? So guys, Mario, I mean, the way we know each other is through the EMT life, and I wanted to have Mario come on because he is a wealth of knowledge, and he has a lot of variety as far as like the roles and hats that he's worn, including being a dad. And I think he can bring some insight into how does one generate fulfillment or cultivate fulfillment in any industry. And we, prior to recording, we talked about how things change in our lives. Priorities change. As we get older, we might have more responsibilities and what we can call overhead that we have to provide for, and we're no longer just thinking for ourselves.
Yeah.
So if we were to, and most episodes follow a chronological order. So if we were to take it back to the EMT days, what were you planning to do? Like, were we pre-PA, pre-med kind of thing, going down that track for a while, or fire department role?
Yeah, so I think I've kind of always been all over the place.
Okay.
So I wanted to be a firefighter, like
Okay.
coming out of high school. And I think for me coming out of high school, that was kind of like, again, about fulfillment. Like I had dropped out at some point in high school and kind of got back to it. And just like started grinding, I did summer school, I did evening classes. So I was just really on this like, yeah, I'm going to work hard and grind and be a firefighter, and kind of like, not like outwardly a tool, but now looking at my own perspective, it was kind of a tool's perspective. Like,
It didn't seem like that when I met you on the job.
yeah. I guess I was just like, kind of like that grind set, like just trying to get myself together. I'd
Sure.
been down for so long that I was just like, what do I have to do to, put my life together, put myself together, and kind of just keep on shaping this. But, also kind of this like disconnect with what I was doing at the time was like, I was at community college, but I wasn't really like all in it. I was still just like, going to house parties
Sure.
all over, Pilsen.
But at the same time, you were very creative in the sense that, like, you painted, you did murals and stuff like that. Like, did you ever see yourself doing that professionally?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what was hard. I've always kind of been this like jack of all trades, but never the second part, master of none. But, that's what comes with it when you're kind of like all over the place. So it was kind of just like picking my lane. I was kind of like at this crossroads that I just didn't have to or didn't want to pick one thing. And I was just kind of dragging it along, still going down all these different avenues.
Okay.
So I guess the original question is like, where was I going then? Or like, what did I see for myself? So I knew the first thing to do to become a firefighter was to become an EMT. And then, once I started working as an EMT, a few months into it, I found out I was going to be having my first kid, and at that age, I was a year ahead in school. So, I think I was like, maybe like 18, no, 19,
Probably
because
19.
Sam and I always joke like, we could have been teen parents on Teen Mom for like 1 month, and they would have been done with us after that, but it would have been enough to be millionaires. Yeah, but we had him at 19 going on 20, and I think that's when I was kind of like, okay, what am I doing? Is college still viable, you know, because I think like when you have a kid young, your first thing is like, oh my God, like my life, how am I going to do the things that I'm going to do? You know, not life is, it's this like weird mixture of like, my life's over and my life's starting and, you know, I'm going to be this, but I'm not that yet. You know, it's a lot of like emotions. Like becoming a parent is at any age, but there's a lot
Especially
of external
then.
factors that just totally out of your control at that age.
And how much parental help did you have with Noah?
A ton.
Oh,
I mean, like my mom was super supportive. You know, Sam's family, super supportive. She was living with her grandmother at the time. So like her grandmother is pretty much like her mom, or at least at that point, you know, throughout her life, that was like her maternal person. And then, you know, now her mom, well, that's like a whole other thing. That's not really like my story to tell. You can have Sam on here also. But yeah, we had a lot of support. We had a lot of parental support. My dad wasn't really in my life. Like, I don't know. That's a whole other thing to get into. So like growing up, he had a lot of psych issues.
Sure.
He was a schizophrenic, and at some point, well, bipolar schizophrenic. They took him off his meds cold turkey, and this guy wigged out, you know, just couldn't really like sustain a family life anymore. I mean, it was essentially like the patients we were picking up, you know, just kind of incoherent rambling and, you know, prone to lashing out and kind of just, you know, becoming physically abusive and things like that. So he was out of our life pretty early on. But he would come back into it in very destructive ways. Yeah, it was kind of interesting because like we always knew our dad was around from like little things, and me and my brothers laugh about it, but it was like very traumatic. Like my mom, and you have to like keep perspective, you know, she was, you know, being physically abused, and he would come around and like turn in her rear view mirrors on her truck just to like let her know he had been around. And like
God.
Yeah, he would just kind of like drive around the block. So like he wasn't out of our lives, but he was like
Lingering.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's really hard to move on from something like that when it's just going on for years. Like he would like show up to like my school and just like be like, yeah, I'm the parent, and just like have it together for like enough to be like, I'm the parent here, you know, show me to my kid's classroom. And it would just be like,
we talked about that on one of the last episodes on one of the gun instructors I had on, and how people like that can just fake background checks and stuff and still legally get a gun.
Yeah, and it's amazing. You know, like my dad was like a big jock. He was very well accomplished. You know, like he just kind of went very far in life, and to a point, you know, because I think when you're on your meds and you're kind of, you know, you go through episodes, and he would go through these manic episodes where it'd be like, okay, go into the hospital, get well, come out, go back to functioning, very high functioning too. He was a diver, he was a diving instructor, he was an engineer, he had a pilot's license, like, very high achieving, did a lot of things. And I think sometimes I'm like critical of myself because it's like, oh my God, I'm my father reincarnated, which
that's another conversation. It's just like, you never thought, I personally, like, I never thought I'd be as similar as I am to my dad.
Yeah. And I think the thing that's hard is like, from a generational standpoint, now you have all the criticisms that you kind of like hold for your parents, but it's also like now self-directed too, where it's like there's grounds for improvement always. And I don't want to come off as like bashing, you know, my parents or, you know, my father specifically, because, you know, he was a very caring father.
But from the sense of room for improvement.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think for myself, you know, like he taught me a lot with how not to be versus how to be, like, because sometimes I have to stop and like be critical of myself as a parent, because like I learned how to be a good parent from a very manic person, you know? So I think a lot of that has translated to like, you know, like we were talking about earlier, you know, I want to give my kids a lot of things, but also what's reasonable, you know, and I do, you know, I feel like, you know, I crossed the line. No, you know, it's all reasonable stuff. I'm not like, let's go jump out of an airplane right now, you know? Excuse me. But at the same time, you know, like I have to be on the same page with Sam, where like she didn't learn like that kind of like manic style of parenting, where like she's more grounded in like, no, Mario, we can't go to the arcade at 9 a.m. And I'm like, why not? And it's like, well, we have a puppy at home, you know, that we have to take care of, and we have to do, you know, all of these things. And I think for me, it's like, you have to like stop and be like, okay, be reasonable, compromise, yeah, I don't know. I guess I've kind of gone on a little bit of a tangent, but yeah, I think I learned a lot from him as far as parenting. So, kind of like rewinding, becoming a teen parent, I was
Yeah.
kind of like, I'm doomed. Like, between
Wow.
everything in my life that, not necessarily like shortcomings or like being ill prepared, but like I just kind of was like, I'm not going to be good at this. You know what I mean?
Wow, I didn't
And
know that.
yeah, well, there's the flip side of then what you present to the world, where
Sure,
it's like,
sure.
I'm an EMT, and I'm at the time, I wanted to do med school, I wanted
Okay.
to do law school. I always kind of like, I guess, kept myself grounded with like all the self doubts, with being like, no, ultimately, I'm going to do something if I just keep ramming my head into that wall, and originally I wanted to do med school, so kind of like did the intro courses at UIC, and it's like, oh, this isn't happening. I think I got to like, Orgo, and I was like, I'm not enjoying myself. This is not what I want to do. And, now working closely with a lot of physicians, they're
Yeah.
kind of like, oh yeah, a lot of that's like weed out stuff. And, you need it for the MCATs. You do need it like as foundations, but it's hard in college, and ultimately I decided not to do it. So then I kind of switched lanes and decided to go on to be an attorney. And that kind of has to do again with my dad's condition. What I want to do is kind of like mental health advocacy, and, I want to do immigration reform, again, totally all over the place. And eventually I got into law school, so I graduated from UIC. I got a full ride when I came out of community college, the whole time kind
To
of
UIC?
juggling,
Or-
correct,
okay.
to UIC, yeah. So graduated from Malcolm X. I went on to UIC, got a full ride there the whole time. My brothers, my mom, my aunts, they're all supporting me, taking care of Noah, going to school, working on the ambulance. Excuse me. I don't know if you remember, but I did like county car a lot, which was like the overnight 14-hour like kind of like neonatal transport.
I did that during medic school.
Yeah, I mean, it was good for school.
Yeah.
So I would do that a lot. Just work all night, go to school during the day, like Noah would be at home sleeping, or he would be with Sam because we were separated at the time. Just kind of like grinding until finally I got into law school. And then, I was like, all right, like I'm here now, and then it's still more years of work. But I think once I was in law school, I was kind of like, okay, now this is where it's more taxing. Like you can't work. I mean, technically you
Through
can,
law school.
yeah, you can sneak it in,
Yeah.
but you do have to like essentially have a contract that you won't work while you're in school, especially what they call 1L, which is like your first year in law school. Super demanding, super time consuming. You're just in the library like all the time. And I think like at that point I was just kind of realizing I'm kind of 1 foot in the door with parenting, 1 foot in the door with school, and that was kind of where I just
And then
I hit-
work. Like, where does work? You know,
Yeah.
it's like you're not going to work at that
Exactly.
point.
I mean, like, I was living with my mom at the time,
Sure.
and it was kind of like I don't feel good as like a parent. Given, I'm also like in my early 20s, it's reasonable, especially when you're in school. But I was kind of like, I'm a parent now, like I can't be living at home. And my mom was really supportive, like, well, you're in school, you're not just like,
Doing nothing.
exactly. And I was like, but I want to do nothing. No, I'm just joking. But I think at that point, I just kind of hit this like, like I was saying, there's crossroads. I hit one I couldn't pass. Like I wanted to be a father more than I wanted to be a student. And don't get me wrong, there was going to be a payoff at the end, but I was just starting to like,
Yeah.
me.
If it's worth it, or
question it. Yeah, exactly. I was starting to question.
Did you meet people that were doing it on a day-to-day basis of being an attorney, and did that give you insight into making that decision?
I mean, I wish I did. 'Cause
Oh,
I think
okay.
if I did, like, I would have had more perspective. But this was totally just as like a kid struggling with a kid in law school, raised by a single mother. At the point, like Sam and I are married now, but it was very much like baby mama drama at the time.
Sure.
And I was like, I'm not cut out for this. Like I'm from the hood. I have no way to succeed. Like, it's hard to talk about these things without discounting people that are in your life. Like
Yeah.
I don't want to come off as like I didn't have enough support because it's
Oh,
brat.
no,
It's
yeah.
bratty. You know
Right,
what I
right,
mean?
right.
But at the same time, like there's the real point of like I was struggling. So eventually, I left law school, and I still remember like getting on the pink line that day, and I was like in between like being really relieved and like wanting to cry. But like ultimately I went to like 7-Eleven, like got a 40 ounce and just like drank it on the street. And I was like, fuck this. I'm going back to like the life I was living, and I'll find a way. You know what I mean? And I think like I kind of like withdrew a little bit from like, not from the world, but just like, I don't know. I just kind of like felt down for a little bit because it's like I knew I was doing the right thing, but it felt very wrong. And I think sometimes you just got to like feel out your lows a little bit. And it felt like a low for me, you know?
Okay.
Even though it was everything I wanted to do.
You
Like,
were at this point. Were you off the ambulance now, or were you?
yes.
Yeah, you were
So I was off the ambulance, and I was kind of like
trying to do school full time.
yeah. And I
Okay.
think I was actually about to like let my EMT license lapse.
Did you come back?
I didn't.
You didn't
no,
come back.
no, I
did
didn't.
You go to,
And-
is that what CTA after?
Yeah.
Dude, I can't wait to hear these stories.
Yeah, so I went from being an EMT, and then in law school, and then to working on the CTA as a bus driver, and like
Did
I was just
you ever
like,
think you'd be doing that?
Whoa!
Did you ever think?
No, I mean like, coming from a graffiti background, like I think at a certain point,
How many buses did you take?
yeah, I'm checking them out in the garage, like, ooh, who put this here? No, but I think like, from a graffiti standpoint, it crossed my mind to like get the uniform, to be able to like sneak into the yard.
You're on the other
and,
side.
like,
You're on the inside.
yeah,
now.
but then I'm like legitimately working there, like, yep, driving the bus. And like the thing that's crazy is like, as a bus driver, it's such a difficult job, but like I feel like it's also like one people like just look past. So like
Yeah.
I would sit there and like I would drive routes around like my own neighborhood, like Roosevelt, 18th,
Yeah.
and like people would get on the bus and I'd be like, "Hey, what's up?"
Oh my
and They'd be
God.
like, "Pfft." They'd be like, "It's me. We were just together yesterday." have you ever seen the Hot Chick with Ralph Schneider, where like he's lost in the other girl's body and he's like, "It's me, Jessica." That's how I felt. Like, you're just like, people see past you, but then like you get to the point where you start seeing past people too, which was like,
Oof.
yeah, really weird. Like there's a certain
Like
like
jadedness in a way, or
definitely, yeah.
Okay,
I
or
mean,
you're
being
just coasting.
like jaded. I mean, being a rider on the CTA, I mean, I'm sure everyone's kind of had the experience where it's just like, this is horrible. This is awful. Imagine that being your everyday. And then in between, you're getting off at random places to wait for your next route. Like the CTA will literally just like leave you there and it'll be like, yeah, you'll get on another bus in an hour to relieve someone else. Have fun over.
I didn't know that's how it was.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I mean, like, the reality of Chicago, it's dangerous to drop people off in certain neighborhoods, but that's what CTA drivers do.
I thought you just had your bus. You would get on at a certain point, and then maybe you would get off at that certain point, unless you're taking it back to the garage or something like that.
So-
I'm not sure.
It's like, it's designated points. They're not just like, all right, we're here, get off. No, but you have a schedule where basically, like, you're responsible for getting on to the next bus at that point.
Yeah.
So you're responsible for getting onto the bus at that next point. And like what a lot of drivers would do is they'd be like, okay, I know I'm going to be dropped off on, Pulaski, or I think like Kedzie and Roosevelt was one of them. It's been several years. But they'd be like, I'll just have my car parked there and I'll get into my car. And some people loved it because they'd be like, I'll go to the gym, I'll go grocery shopping, I'll do what I need to do. But for me, it was like, I don't want to be hanging out here. I pass. So, I mean, like, I think the more jaded part of the job for me just kind of came from like being on the CTA all the time. Like,
Okay.
you are the operator, but that doesn't take away from the fact that you're on a bus all the time and just crazy stuff is happening. And you just feel like, like those old, like, kind of like 90s road trip movies where like they're like, I'll
Like
turn
vacation
this thing
movies?
around.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like that, but like with the wildest of people.
How much situational awareness did you gain from that role?
Well, I think I always had a lot of situational awareness just because, like, of where I grew up. So, like,
Yeah.
even being on the bus, I kind of came into it like, yo, this is a sketchy route. Like, you can play somebody else. Like, it's okay to drop them off at 10 o'clock at night here. But for me, I'm not down with it, I think, like, one of the sketchiest things I had happen while I was driving was, like, I had someone on the back that was passed out. And, like, I got to the end of my route and was like, okay, it's time to get off, and then you kind of go through all the ways that they've trained you to deal with that. And eventually we had to have like police come because they got like combative and like I don't know, part of me is also like, I don't blame you. Like, you're just trying to like pass out somewhere and still get to where you're going.
Sure.
And like, you know, the dude was probably like, what's the term? Not homeless, houseless, you know? So it's a place to be. It's a roof over your head. It's warm. It was colder out. So it's like, okay, I don't blame you, but like, I also don't want anything to happen to me. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and not to like assume that like someone who's just passed out is like gonna hurt you, but it's like, yo, this isn't the life I want to live. Like, I've got a child back at home, and I'm still just trying
you
to
knew
make
that
it.
there's an end date.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, I was 2 weeks in, ready to put in my 2 weeks. And then it's funny because, like, you go through this, like, training, too, where, like, with any company, you know, the training is like, everything's great here. And you start off, like, I hope the CTA doesn't come after me for all
Not
of this.
even.
So you start off, like, downtown, and you're, like, kind of, like, in the West Loop. And it's like, oh, this is cool. It's, like, corporate. Like, they run things well. And it's like, now you're all going to go off for your individual training. So,
Okay.
like, you know, the CTA, like, train operators go one place, and, like, the bus operators go to another.
Did you have the option of train
So
or bus? Or?
I applied for.
Oh, they're separate. They're separate, just completely
Yeah, so-
separate. Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, it's not like single file, like, you go here, like the sorting hat and Harry Potter. Bus operator.
Orange line.
So, yeah, the sorting hat told me I was a Slytherin, which is bus operators, apparently.
You get the Madison bus.
Yeah, that means you're super sketchy. Send Mario to the west side. All right, all bullying aside. Yeah, so then you go to your individual training, you know. So we went to the, I don't know, let's just call it bus school, you know. So we went to the bus school, we sang Wheels on the Bus Go Round, and then they sent us out. No, it just like got progressively more removed from that very like well polished kind of
Sure.
like corporate thing, as it's like, all right,
It's
now
kind of like EMT school. Now you get on the streets, it's like, what
Yeah.
is this janky ass stretcher that I'm working with?
Exactly.
Nursing homes that I'm working with.
go burn rubber, you know, break your back, go do what you got to do. Where's my money? Yeah, so it just got like progressively more sketchier, and then, you know, I don't know, I could go like on and on about
What did you have? Were you able to provide preference to the neighborhood you or the bus you actually did end up driving?
So you get to do what's called like picks. It's like seasonal. So it's a union job, and it's union in the sense that like there is seniority. So the most senior people get to take the first picks, which are eventually these predetermined sheets of how your route's going to work. And I mean, it makes sense just from like an organizational standpoint. They have to have a bus schedule. Things just have to work in transit to get operators to where they need to be, to get people where they need to be. And basically, if you just started, you're at the very bottom of that pick. So everyone lines up, basically goes to a board, gets their pick by seniority. And then when you get yours, you're basically left with like nothing. And then you can also do like what's essentially on call, which is like you call in. God, I can't remember the time, but it was in the evening. And excuse me. You basically call in and you get your shift for the next day. And some people like it because
Like
it's
a random
like
shift?
yeah,
Oh.
it's like it's a lot of money. But at the same time, like, you know, say you're calling in at 8 o'clock, which I don't know if that's what it is. Again, it was a long time ago. I'll be like, yeah, come in at 4 a.m. And I'll be like, okay, let me put down my beer and I will be there. Just joking, kind of. But I remember there was like, you know, I was there probably for like half a year, and I think there was like a few weeks I had to be on that pick, and I hated it. Like, you would just call in, and like the flip side to like making money but having a bad schedule is then not having something to do, where it's like, okay, like I need my work. But again, because it's seniority and it's considered a union job, you have part-timers and you have full-timers. So as the full-timers leave, they turn you over into full-time from part-time. But with part-time, they keep you under, I want to say like 36 hours or 38. And by keeping you under, you don't get a lot of the benefits. And what's kind of interesting is like, again, because there's that time in between transit or routes, you might be at work in the sense of being away from your home for, you know, 40 hours plus a week, essentially making overtime. But your schedule or your pick, you're essentially out for 40 hours, but you're only on a bus for 20, 24. It was sketchy.
That's kind
yeah,
of okay.
and you know, I'm sure there's a reason they do it. There's obviously, it's a company, it makes sense, it drives money. But like for me, I was like, this is crazy. Like, I just left law school and now I'm being like, you can't treat me like this. I was almost a lawyer.
I saw a driver, like, not body, like he picked up probably someone that was on the bus and just like flipped him upside down and just like slammed him on the ground. I think he was immediately fired after that.
That was me, bro. I was both
Like-
the slammy and the slammer.
Like, what if you don't have the capabilities to do that? Like, at what point are you supposed to never get physical? Like, what if
Yeah.
there's freaking altercation and you can't wait for the cops at all the time? It's just like,
So the way you're trained just makes you like the most like passive, aggressive person ever. Like basically like for fare, that's a good example.
yeah.
You can request your fare 3 times. You have to request your fare 3 times.
And if they
Anything
don't pay
beyond
you?
that, leave it alone. Yeah, and I think that's just based off of like there's obviously been way too many confrontations between employees and commuters. But like I would literally just be like, hey, you got your fare? You got your fare? I want to be like, excuse me, sir. Like if you're making a fool out of people, they're gonna make a fool out of you, and I think
Ooh.
that's where like you get into those situations. But like no,
It's not worth your job.
it's not worth your life. Like,
not worth your
forget the
life.
job. Like,
Yeah.
it's Chicago. Like, everything is your life, is what you should be thinking about. People.
I mean, are there any penalties for not getting a fare? Like,
I imagine if, like, you were just, like, very straightforward
slap
about it,
on the
like,
wrist,
I didn't
yeah.
collect a lot of fares today. Yeah, there's going to be a penalty. But at the same time, you have, like, a little, counter underneath, and I don't know. I think there's like a button you press, like fare waived, or like.
is there an incentive for getting more riders? Like, not really, right?
No.
So then, yeah.
But that's again, like you're hitting it on the head. Like being a driver there, like we talked about, it's very like, it just makes you very like, bleh. You know what I mean? There's not an incentive,
It's
at
funny,
least
'cause
that
when,
I know.
when you
of.
first started the conversation, and this is what I love about the fire department is like you're doing kind of a community service in a way. It's
Yeah.
like you get to put a face to someone serving that community, especially if you grew up in that part of the city.
Dude, and I was happy to do that as a bus driver.
Yeah.
And then I started working the job, and I was like, no. Like, there are some people that are just genuinely still, like, about, like, community service. I mean, I'm sure riding the CTA, you see people that are like, hey, good morning, all right. And they're, like, jolly. Like, those people have good picks, like we talked about before. Like, they have seniority. They are happy. Not to, like, discount, their experience and them being a good person, but, like, you're happy for a reason, bro. And, like, there are a lot of people that are not happy because of,
It's just a
the way
job.
they're working.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's hard to remain happy in that job. And, I don't want to bash it, and I didn't do it
And
for a long
there
time,
wasn't a
so
lot
I'm
of
not the most
turnover, right?
experienced.
So it's hard to gain seniority.
There's a lot of turnover
Maybe at the
at
bottom,
the low end.
at the bottom,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah,
right.
so I guess you can kind of think about it like as a pyramid. Like, there's no turnover where you want it to be at the top, and at
Yeah.
the base, it's just a revolving door. But, like, I don't know. It's also like, I don't want to, like, do the whole, like, Kim Kardashian narrative, like, people don't want to work. Because I don't believe that, but a lot of other people's sentiments are that. And, like, I remember being kind of, like, in our Wheels in the Bus Go Round and Round class, and there was, like, one younger kid where, like, he had gotten on with the CTA, and a lot of, like, the older people who were going through this training were like, oh, I wish I had this job at your age, because, like, you can make bank. Like, I was making more there than I was making as, like, clinical support as an anesthesia technician. Like,
Oh,
was
wow.
a major pay cut compared to the CTA. But
Okay.
it's not all about the money, as far as, like, the hours and kind of the games that the CTA was playing. But, like, at that lower kind of, like, end of the pyramid, where there's a lot of turnover and it's a revolving door, like, obviously there's a good reason why, like we've talked through, but at the same time, like, I don't think our generation wants to work a job like that, it's just very, like, soul crushing. And, like, it's not even, like, my criticism of, like, our generation. I don't care. I just think the reality of it, because I went through it, and, like, I can kind of talk about it, is, like, I didn't want to do it. It felt, like, very defeating as a person. And I've worked, like, a lot of jobs. I mean, like, I worked in an automotive warehouse that was like, God, almost like 100 degrees plus, and we would still just work. I don't mind doing like
Hard work.
exactly like
Right.
I can do the hard work, and not even just speaking to physical labor. Like I can do hard work mentally. That job was just very like, there's a lot of things wrong here, and I'm not going to be continuing with this. You know.
The last guest I had on, one of the last guests I had on, you might have met him, Eric. He works at the bike lane in Logan.
Oh yeah, at your old apartment for the Game of Thrones
you did
party.
meet him.
Yeah.
And
He's so cool. I still have him like on social media.
I was trying to generate a discussion on like cyclists versus drivers, but from the driver's perspective, it's just like how has the city of Chicago like evolved for both drivers and cyclists?
Yeah, and I think like Chicago's a super bike friendly city. Like I remember just kind of like turning over from like my little hood cruiser to getting an actual road bike and being like, oh, this is cool. This is like a whole thing on its own in the city. And like my brother got super into riding, and he got hit by cars over and over, and like, not to say he's a bad,
like he got hit several times.
like several times. Yeah, not to say he's a bad rider, but I think it's just more like the frequency and the areas to be riding in. Like he got hit several times. I think to the point where my mom was just like, please don't ride your bike anymore. Like
hit in one way, like hit like
like he was under a car at some point. He got knocked off of his bike. My other brother, it's like a frequency thing in my opinion. If you're just doing something a lot, you're increasing your odds.
What's the root cause? Is it the cars being reckless? Is it him being reckless? Because there's both sides, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is like at the root cause, I don't believe he's like a bad rider. Like that's not what I'm trying to say. I think it's just more this kind of like thing. Not to say like people dislike others for their form of transportation, which is totally dumb.
No. But everyone is so tunnel vision on their own where they gotta be.
Exactly. You're focused on yourself.
And now if you're the driver or you're the cyclist, you're in my way.
Yeah. So like if I'm in a car, I have a hard time dealing with people on bicycles. If I'm on a bicycle, I have a hard time dealing with people on cars.
What about from the bus driver's perspective?
Yeah, I think from the bus driver's perspective, like you need to always be right because you are driving.
How bad is the blind spot?
I mean, it's worse at certain points. So like when people do things that they shouldn't be doing, and again, returning
like
to the
weaving in and out of traffic.
Exactly, returning to the same thing like pedestrian, bicycles, cars. If people are doing wild things around you, it's going to be very hard to do something safely. But I think what I learned when I was operating the bus is like if you're in a bad situation, just stay still. Like at some point people will figure things out, but you moving that vehicle in the wrong way is really going to do damage. And I think there's kind of a hierarchy to that too. Like a bus is going to wreck a car is going to wreck someone on a bicycle.
Right.
A bicycle will wreck a pedestrian. Like you just have to kind of like be considerate of others and where you are and what your responsibility is.
Zipping around the city now?
I know, it's hitting everybody's shins. Yeah, I don't know who like saw scooters and like that.
They go fast.
That's the future. I know. I was in
Can't imagine a scooter hitting a pothole.
I feel like it's big in a lot of other cities. Like God, where was I recently? St. Louis, it was really big in, and
I'm surprised they made a comeback here.
Yeah, I think like for a while they were just all over, and they just made the move like get them out. Like people were tripping over them, and then they made a comeback.
Yeah, because people would park them anywhere.
It was like a trial period, I think.
And then like handicapped people are just you can't use the sidewalk if they're left everywhere.
And then where do they go? Like in the bike lane on the sidewalk?
Now you got to park them back at the divvy racks or something like that, or
is that what it is?
Yeah, Divvy bought them out, I think.
Oh,
of
course. Yeah, they're like going to become the Amazon of like transportation.
But it's also led to other people buying their own e-scooters as well. So maybe some people did like them.
The skateboards are really cool, like those long boards with like the remote. Like it just looks like something out of the future.
That or I saw a gang of one wheels the other day.
Really?
Like 6 people on a one wheel, and they're all just
on different one wheels, right?
Not
gang. One wheel for 6 people. I was like, damn,
a clown
that is
one
wheel efficiency.
Yeah, but they go fast.
Yeah,
all
those
things
things
lean forward, and it's just like it's going.
Dude, but also like if you eat shit on those things, like you're done. Like those are scary.
They were weaving on and off the sidewalk. Would be hopping curbs and stuff. Like just like, and like the whole wheel just comes up, and I'm like, what?
And they're just totally like, this is normal. And I'm like, whoa, that's a unicycle, dude. That is like a motorized unicycle.
Yeah.
A unicycle's impressive on its own.
They can sit on. Some of those have seats.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. That's pretty
really
cool.
Weird.
Wow. Maybe I'll start with a seated unicycle.
I tried getting on a hoverboard. I busted my shit. I couldn't.
Oh.
I'm like, I'm young enough to still do this. Like,
Yeah.
I can do this. I'm like, I can't.
Those are like the ones you stand on and
Yeah.
lean. Yeah. My cousin put me on one, and I just like spun for 5 minutes, and I couldn't get off.
How do you get on with just one foot at a time? It's like,
Yeah. And she's like, it's so easy. And she gets on and is like chilling, and I get on, and I'm just like, like gonna take off like a helicopter. It was so funny though, because like at some point, I think like my brother just bear hugged me and like popped me off of the thing because no one could get me off. Like I was spinning so fast. It was horrible. And it was like Christmas too, so like I was ready to yak after like 2 rotations. It was horrible. Awful experience.
So you had it with CTA.
Yeah.
Right.
So I had it with CTA.
What was next? When did I call you to come on at Northwestern?
That's what I'm trying to remember. So like,
because you never went back to ATI?
no, I didn't. So leaving CTA, like I had finished a route and my aunt called me. I was like, hey, I'm going to Wisconsin Dells. Do you want to come? And I was like, no, I got to work tomorrow. And she's like, just quit. And I was kind of at that point. There's like certain points in your life. If someone tells you just quit, like you're like, yes, that is what I needed to hear. So she was like, just quit.
Did she know what you were experiencing?
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, like,
okay.
dude, I pretty much like, you know, not with the pandemic, you know, I see them less, but like I pretty much lived at my grandparents', you know. At some point I did live at my grandparents', but even when I didn't, I was still over there like every day. They were down the block, you know. So she knew what I was going through. You know, my aunt's always been like my support system, you know, like
Gotcha.
I have several moms because I have my aunts,
Sure,
you know.
sure.
So she knew exactly what I was going through. So like it wasn't just like a totally unfounded just quit. It was like, no, just quit. Like you're at that point. We've already had like
You'll
our
figure it out,
conversations.
yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, you know what? Wisconsin Dells do be sounding pretty nice right now. So, yeah, I mean, like I talked to the garage supervisor and was like, I'm out. And he's like, okay, well, you know, there's a process to this. I was like, cool. I was done. Like it wasn't even 2 weeks. Like I gave them my keys. I didn't even like care what was theirs and what was mine. Like I was like at the point where like, here's my shirt. Like I'm not coming back. Yeah, so I left, and then I'm trying to remember like what happened on that like in between, because I feel like I wasn't not working.
I forgot like
Excuse me.
what did I see that I was like we should have Mario at Northwestern. I can't remember.
My good looks and
Right?
sense of
Like,
humor.
we had a good time on the ambulance, and same. I thought the same when I brought a few people. Like Anthony came there for a little bit.
Yeah.
Rachel, like for a hot second, right, Anthony?
Yeah.
I mean, I caught up with Anthony the other day, and he's killing it now. He operates a yard and stuff like that, and heavy machinery. So
Yeah,
he's-
I remember
he's
him
killing it.
coming on, and we were kind of still like more in a building phase there, where like we were starting to do like really good in services, but like
Gotcha.
I don't think he got any of that. Like for his orientation, it was kind of this weird, like not management, but kind of like immediate supervisor turnover.
Before we record, we were talking about a buddy named Dan Montez, and
Hmm.
when he was at ATI, he dropped the name that I haven't heard of in a while. The guy that hired me, Jeff DeVos.
Oh wow!
Right?
I forgot about
And
that.
then he got on the city and left.
Memory unlocked. Wow. There's certain names where it's like that was a person.
Tall, crew cut, tan.
Yeah.
just- yeah.
Yeah. Kind of reminded me of like Anthony Bourdain, but like
Oh. No, maybe younger. Yeah, maybe younger
I
Anthony.
don't know. Maybe I just replaced people with Anthony Bourdain in my
Not a bad replacement.
Because even like the guy who hired me for the job I work now, I was like, I can't remember what he looks like, and I'm like, yeah, Anthony Bourdain. I don't know. Maybe it's just like my go-to person. Like, just crop them out and put in Anthony Bourdain. You know?
Yeah, not a bad replacement.
Yeah.
So yeah, what do you think you were doing?
God, I mean, like just dealing with a lot of like fighting between like Sam and I at that point. I think I fell on a lot of like bad old habits, you know, where it was just kind of like, all right, you know, I think at that point I was probably like, I don't know, I'm so bad, like chronologically, I was old enough to drink, let's say that, and like
Yeah.
start going to bars, and you know, like coming out of law school, then working at the CTA, I was just like, all right, let's start doing stuff, you know. So, I mean, like, yeah, I think I just kind of like got to like partying and like, I don't know, just like very like age appropriate things, but just like not person appropriate things, you know, like I
Playing catch up with
yeah,
yourself.
exactly. You know, and not to say I didn't get a lot of that off of my chest at like in my teenage years, but I think it was just now different because it was like you get your ID and that's pretty much like your green card to just go, or your green light, sorry, your green light to just like go crazy, you know, like
Yeah.
the world's like you can drink and act a fool now. And like Pilsen was changing at the time too, where like before being on 18th Street, you know, kind of like tipsy was like, ooh, you know, the cops are going to come mess with us, versus like now being on 18th Street tipsy was like, oh man, have a good time.
It's the place to be now, huh?
Yeah, and I mean, like growing up in it and like living on 18th, it's all outside of your front step. Like that's why everyone moved here, because it's such an awesome neighborhood. And I think just like kind of being able to like finally enjoy those experiences under like the new light that was shed on them, where it's like, oh, like yeah, you guys can do this stuff. That's perfectly fine. Was like, what? Like you were just messing with me last year, you know? Like, I mean, obviously we were in the wrong, but like a good example of that is like Amador's over on like 18th and
The liquor
Racine.
shop?
Yeah, that was like a block away from my house.
The
but,
red
like,
awning, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. The classic red awning. But we had like got liquor from there as like, I don't know, we were probably like 18, so like we just had somebody like run it for us. But it was like one of those like weird moments where like you have no runners to go get it for you. So like I think we like just asked like somebody on the street, and they're like, oh yeah, cool. And then like they came out and the cops pulled up and they're like, what are you doing here? And like, I don't know, we were just kind of like,
To you guys.
yeah, to us. And then like they actually like took my friend and like took him away, and like I don't think he got locked up, but like they like brought him home.
Even though
and,
you didn't have
like-
liquor in hand? Or did you have liquor in hand?
No, like the dude walked away with the liquor, but they were like, you're clearly buying liquor. But like I guess my point more so is like the cops couldn't mess with you in any way that they wanted to back then. And like with that, it's like, okay, every time it's not like you're not doing something wrong, but it's also like, is it merited for you to just fucking be wasting your time like messing with us, you know? And like
Probably
that's
better
a-
things to do, yeah.
yeah, and that's a very mild example, you know, like there were times like they would just pick people up from the neighborhood and like drop them off in like the other side of the neighborhood, which they couldn't be in, and be like, oh yeah, this is a, you know, Latin King, this is this, and it'd just be like, you realize like what this is doing to people. Like this is legitimately like getting people jumped. This is like, okay, so if you get away by running, because obviously they're not going to like do something in front of the cops, or they might, and the cops will probably look the other way, but you know, they would just kind of like mess with people, you know, and very.
Okay, is that shit? Do you think it's still going on? Maybe not in Pilsen, or a little. I don't know.
It's still going on.
It's still going
I
on?
would never say it's not.
Mhm.
You know, my whole thing is like, I guess by ratio, how much is it still going on?
Mm.
I think it's going on less. I would never say it's not going on.
Now, in that, you know, growing up with that,
Yeah.
would you ever consider becoming a cop to change things from the inside?
I did at some point.
Right?
So.
Was that it? Was that
yeah,
what you were doing?
I think that might have been it. Yeah. So I think at that point,
Or sheriffs, because
DEA.
DEA.
Yeah,
were
I
you
was in-
asking for
That's-
referrals, and your
that's
name
what
was in
it
the back of my
was.
mind because I think you were asking for referrals and something.
Yeah,
something
I
like
was
that.
applying for the DEA when I left the
Oh.
CTA, and I had moved far along in the process. Like I actually did
Yeah.
a like language assessment. Basically, like they will give you, I don't know the government terms, but basically like a higher authorization or ranking, essentially is what it is, for having more language proficiency. So basically, like I got on the phone with an interpreter. I just like evaluated my Spanish, and like I was going to like the DEA office to like do all of like my assessments and moving along. And then they moved the goalpost at some point and were like, oh, we're reclassifying something, reapply, like you're pretty much good to go. But I think at that point I was just kind of like, I don't want to be a DEA agent. Excuse me.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a DEA agent, you know. Again, and it's one of those things that sounds really cool, but like the practice was like, oh, I'm good, man. Like that sounds kind of wild. I think at that point is when I came on with Northwestern, and then I want to say it came back up later on in Northwestern. Like they reached out again, like, hey, we want to bring you on, and I was like, no, like I'm good. Yeah, that was like that in between. I think it was like CPD and DEA. I was considering both.
So what goes through someone's head if you grew up with some animosity against these entities,
Yeah.
and like, is it naive to think that you can change things from the inside?
That's exactly
Or
what it is.
the community that you end up serving, do you think you're now one of them and you're on the other side, you're snitching? Like what?
So I took the bait on like a lot of that, like change from within. And I guess it's wrong to call it bait because I'm sure a lot of people are making an impact because obviously there's been some shift in things getting better somewhat, but
Because it takes someone who have experienced something to make an impact on someone who's experiencing the rough stuff right now, right?
I feel like they've also changed their hiring policy though, because when I was going through it, I actually didn't pass because of some of the things I was just forthcoming about. They were
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
no, there's absolutely no way we would ever have an officer. And then the kind of ironic thing is then they reached out and were like, hey, you know, we rejected you, but we want you to reapply, come back in. I think they're going to start me like after the power, like maybe do like, I don't even think I had to do the psych. It was like basically like they were going to make another final decision and I didn't want to do it because like for me, I think I took a lot of the things they were saying and I was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, like change from within. I'm down for this, you know, and then the same things that I felt qualified me to be a good candidate as far as my experiences, which weren't necessarily good experiences
No,
from their
but
perspective.
it makes you
but
relatable, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Personality-wise,
Yeah.
experience-wise, and just kind of policing-wise, you know, the discretion to be like, look, man, you've got something to smoke a blunt here. I'm not going to lock you up for trying to smoke a blunt when I hear a pistol popping 2 blocks away. But also, you know, from a officer's perspective, which do I want to do? You know, I got somebody I can spend the next, I don't know how long it takes to lock people up. I mean, I've sat in lockup. I don't know what their process looks like. You know, I could spend the next few hours locking this kid up, or I could go chase somebody, you know, shooting a pistol a few blocks away. It's kind of like,
Damn.
I don't know, personally, like, not to be, again, in that, like, tool mentality, but, like, I care a lot more about that pistol because that, I think I've just found out too many times that, like, hearing a pistol going off, it turned out to be somebody I knew that ended up getting shot, you know, or somebody that was related to somebody I knew, you know. It's like the 6 degrees of separation thing. I think whether it's your community, if you're from Chicago, you should consider this all your community. And that's just me. You know, I can't convince anybody on that. I won't argue with anyone else. But, like, working on the ambulance, like, I cared about a lot of the people I picked up, even though I wasn't from that community as far as, like, area code. We're all from Chicago. And, I mean, I think as you get older, you start to appreciate more of a global perspective, you know, whether you want to say we're all from planet Earth, you know, it's very broad and kind of flowery language. But, like, you should care about people. We are a global community, you know, but local community is where you can kind of make a more immediate impact. So, I mean, I don't know. I just think, like, I was down for a lot of it as far as, like, yeah, make a change from within. You know, I don't know at what point I would have hit walls or they would have pumped brakes or if it was just kind of like a good ad campaign. But I wanted to do it, you know.
What were your thoughts on the whole, the riots, like George Floyd, BLM?
I mean, it was all
How rough
merited.
it, and even these
It was
things,
all
they're so
merited.
short-staffed.
Yeah, I mean, like, I have no problem saying flat out, like, it was all merited. I mean, it just kind of, like, hit a point where it's like you're blatantly, like, if you watch the video, I don't know how, as a human, you can rationalize, like, kneeling on someone's neck. Like, that is crazy.
But do you think that's representative of all cops or one bad cop?
No, it's not representative of all cops.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't want to do the, like, oh, not all cops, not all men, because there's kind of, like, a counter perspective to that, which I think is more mine. You know, what I subscribe to is, like, no, it's not all cops.
Yeah.
It's not all men. But someone made a really good analogy that, like, to me, it just hit it on the head, and I can't look at it any other way. So if I hand you a bowl of M&Ms, and I'm like, all right, a few of those are poison. What do you want to do with those M&Ms? Do you want to eat them? I don't think you want to eat them. Are you like, yeah, M&Ms? No, there's a distrust. At the least, there's a distrust for that overall bowl. Okay, no, it's not all of them, but
there's no accountability when the poison ones aren't found.
Yeah, M&Ms can't hold M&Ms accountable. No, not to, like, make light of a serious situation, but no, like, there is no accountability, and that's the frustration. Like, I just think I've seen too many times where, like, it hasn't worked and it should work. And, you know, in my personal life, in kind of just, like, a general, you know, and I think for this was, like, a lot of exposure that was just, like, showing everyone the system is really broken and physically supports hurting people, and like to turn around and be like, no, that's okay. Like, at least if you have like a diet opinion, you know, like a very light version of the opinion, you should stop and be like, hey, that probably shouldn't have happened. You know, like I get that like people support cops, you know, and I get that like, you know, there's different movements as far as Blue Lives Matter versus Black Lives Matter. But the thing is, like, Blue Lives Matter was pretty much raised in opposition to Black Lives Matter, you know? And it's like, then there's the All Lives Matter thing. And it's like, okay, if you really meant the... But the thing is, if you meant the message, then you would care about the Black Lives Matter. It's inclusive, you know? They're not included from that statement, but it was raised in opposition to that statement, that specifically Black Lives Matter. And I mean, like, as an organization, I don't know, maybe it's just kind of like me being like punk rock about it, but like I don't support a lot of organizations, you know. So like Black Lives Matter as like, I mean, pretty much a corporation at this point. Like, I'm not down with the corporate part of it, but the message itself, like, hell yeah, but I'm not going to like die on a hill for some organization, you know, like I'm not buying their merch. No, you know what I mean? I guess that's kind of like where I draw the line. Is like, I'm not going to go like all corporate with it, you know what I mean?
I guess I got to have someone that was actually because I didn't make my way down there, right? And like you hear stories of like pallets of bricks being left the day before for people to throw bricks through windows and loot and riot. And what part of looting was behind the messaging of BLM?
I think it was just kind of like frustration. You know, when you're mad, you break things. I mean, like...
Okay, not just break things, but like steal shit too? Like, what is that going to solve for BLM?
I mean, what does it do when, you know, a team wins the series and everybody's like, oh, this is great that you went and broke things for no reason? Then it's just like, all right, go Cubs. You know, specifically, you know, like these kind of like white events, like I'll just be flat out about it. Like, you know, rioting is such a term that you can see someone be like, that's a riot. But to see how they kind of like move it within context, like that's not a riot, that's a celebration, you know? And it's like, okay, so when people are angry, it's wrong to break glass, climb poles, do all of that. But I think like more so speaking to the looting, why are people taking things? Because people are always going to be opportunistic, you know? Like if there's $100 bills on the floor, most people would take it, you know? Personally, I wouldn't, because I know enough to know it's not mine. But, you know, most people, they're opportunistic, you know? And I think when you don't have opportunities, that's when you're more prone to seeking opportunities. Like, okay, if that glass is smashed, or if I have an opportunity to smash that glass and get away with it. Yeah, and I mean, not everybody doing that is down with the cause. They're there seeking opportunity.
Well, what about BLM when, you know, every day Black lives are being lost and shot, right?
Yeah.
So, like, where's the cause? I don't know. I just that doesn't sit well with me. And I think Blue Lives Matter came up because cops in general are trying to be canceled. Like, not just one cop.
The cancel
cops
culture.
in general, right? So, like, when you have an emergency, if you're being shot at, who are you gonna? What do you expect to happen then?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of my in-laws are all police officers, and that's like the go-to argument is like, call your local crackhead. And it's like, I'm going to be real with you. My local crackhead has probably come through for me a lot more times than you have. And that local crackhead might be related to me. So, yeah, I'm going to be real that crackhead's probably more reliable in a lot of situations. I got a bottle smashed on my face, like I was probably like 14, you know, and looking at it now, that's a kid. You know, I got a bottle smashed on my face by like some just random person. There was no reason for it to happen. You know, I was just hanging out with my friend. It's just violence in the hood. But my point is after that bottle was smashed on my face, the neighbors called police, and this guy sprayed chemicals in my eyes. It was a really random situation. Like,
what was he trying to do? Make it better?
Just attacking me. Like, literally just attacking me. No, this wasn't a cop.
Oh.
This was like a random resident. I'm just saying it was a random violent act that happened.
God. Wait,
so
after you got the bottle in the face?
Yes. So the point I'm trying to illustrate, let me just give you the whole story. So me and my homie were just kind of chilling, you know, talking, whatever, just enjoying the neighborhood. You know, it's what you do when you're just from the hood. You don't have anywhere to be. You're just kind of chilling. So we're on like a bus stop or something like that. And this guy came out of his house that was near the bus stop and was like, why are you here? My mom, you know, doesn't want you here. All drunk. Smashed a bottle on my face before we could even like react to what was going on. Smashes a bottle on my face. And that's actually like what this scar's from.
Huh.
Sprays my eyes with like some chemicals he brought out.
Jesus.
At that point, I can't see. And some gangbangers came. Another neighbor called the police, and right away was like, "I'm calling the cops," on the phone, clearly calling the cops. Some gangbangers came, and they were the ones who were like, "We're gonna beat your ass. Don't you ever do that in our neighborhood, especially to a shorty."
Oh.
What the? I guess I should have asked. Can I swear on here?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
like, we're pretty far into it now. They're like, "What the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah,
Like, this is a
yeah.
shorty." Like, obviously, I've always been like a little taller, so it's hard to gauge
Yeah.
kids for being kids. But like, clearly when I'm talking, I'm kind of like squeaky voiced,
Sure,
they're like, "This
sure.
is a fucking shorty. Like,
Yeah.
what are you doing?" This guy goes back in, brings out a pistol. That's the end of it. Total standstill between the two. They're not going to kill him. He's not going to kill them. I'm just kind of the one that gets the bend of the stick. My point is, so the bangers are drinking down the block. They bring me over. They're like, "All right, wash out his eyes, do what we can for him, and send him on his way," because they don't want the heat of the police. The police just show up like, God, 30 minutes later, cruise by. "Oh, is that him? All right, don't be doing that. Take off." My point is that, and it's kind of fucked up to say, at least one of those gangbangers was probably a crackhead. And the crackheads came through for me. So, yes, I will call a crackhead when I am in trouble because they came through. So, like, obviously the whole story, like, is way out there and doesn't apply to everybody's situation. But my whole thing is, like, it's not about who you're calling. It's about knowing that who you're calling is going to support you, not hurt you, not make the situation worse.
I like that, yeah.
And you all have proven to us time and time again that you are not those people. You're more interested in your own ego. A lot of this is ego that's happening. You're interested in ego and, just to hit it on the head, racism. The things you pre-decided about the situation determine how you're interacting in that situation.
Even if it's your own kind?
Oh my God! Even if it's your own kind,
especially your own kind.
Yeah, totally. I think it's worse because there's kind of this like self-deprecating thing where it's like, "Oh no, like I'm not like them," and like, I don't know. You hear so many people say like, "Oh, one of the good ones," and that term's thrown around like it's a good thing, and it's like, yo, like that was just prejudice on its own to be like, "You're one of the good ones." Like, what? How do you even say that out loud? To I don't know. It's just like really disturbing to me that like that there's a lot more behind that. That just scratches the surfaces and it's already offering so much. Like when someone says to you, "Oh, you're really one of the good ones," like it's like,
Yikes. That there's that many bad ones.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Yeah, I mean, like, I've got a lot of, like, personal stories about all that stuff, but I'm just, like...
and that's...
where do you...
That's all people have to draw from is their personal experience with PD, or with anyone, right? And you build your worldview based off that.
Yeah.
And for some, it's probably hard to remain hopeful.
Yeah.
Right? And I guess I see where they're frustrated.
And I guess it's kind of like, the flip side is like, okay, when this person hit me in the face with a bottle, do I turn around and be like, "Oh, man, like... I've got it out for, like, I'm Hispanic, he was Hispanic, but, you switch the scenario to be like, I've got it out for all of whatever you may be from now on." Like, that's just wrong to apply like that to your worldview, everybody is that way. But then again, it's kind of like, thinking back to it's a little hypocritical on my end because the Skittles or the M&M example, are we kind of doing that to cops too? To be like, okay, one cop mistreated me and did this and that, so it's okay to judge cops like that, which, is kind of the point I was illustrating earlier, but it's not okay to judge anyone else like that. It's kind of like, it's a hard one to unwrap. I think
it's because they hold cops to a higher standard.
That's true, yeah. And I wish they were held to that standard.
It's tough because we're all people.
Yeah,
and
I think in healthcare, when we look at it, like, if you see someone doing something that's bad practice, the accountability is there because it's like, it is a higher standard for...
Yeah, I mean, that nurse was going through the ringer when she gave the paralytic versus the sedative.
Yeah, what was her name? DeVoe?
Yeah, she was down in the south.
DeVoe, was it?
Yeah. I don't know her. I forget her name, but yeah, that was very gross negligence, and it ended up being dropped in a way, or just probation or something like that. But no longer a nurse kind of thing, and certain things like in healthcare and when other people's lives are in your hands or in your responsibility,
Yeah.
you probably are held to a higher standard.
And I think that's kind of it, is like, even like the CTA conversation is like realizing your own responsibility in a situation and kind of like acting accordingly. I think you just have to realize when you're in a capacity to do something wrong, you have to be very aware to not do those things wrong. Like if you're driving a car and you shouldn't take a turn, you don't take a turn. But I think just kind of like the lapse in judgment is what's been more concerning with like the kind of like police end of things. Is like, making the wrong choice here is going to have a significant impact in a lot of lives. And I think now people care more from that like Blue Lives Matter end, because it's like, oh, you mean it's going to have an impact in my life? And that's kind of like the self-centered, and it's everybody. People care more when you have something to lose, and now it's like, oh, I could lose my pension. Like someone can lose their life, and it's still not going to feel like that magnitude until something happens to you, and then it's all of a sudden like, oh man, I just took something away from myself. And I think that's like, I don't know, even like the whole pandemic, there was something that
you
I
don't care
feel
until it happens to you or someone you know.
Exactly. And there was something that like in conversation, I think like Sam and I talked about, or like, I don't even remember where it came from, but it was just like one of those moments you kind of like have an epiphany. But we were kind of talking about the language people were using in the pandemic, and like with the masking. It was like with the masking, I think a lot of the narrative being pushed was like, and we did it wrong in my opinion, especially as Americans, to say like your mask protects others, do it for the people around you. There's some people who are immunocompromised. There's all types of reasons you should wear a mask. All we had to say is it protects you. If we would have said it protected you, oh my God.
Yeah, we're all self-centered and self-interest, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, and sometimes you just have to play on that a little bit to know that's the angle to approach people with. I mean, like, I work in kind of like a hybrid sales role now, and I mean, just speaking to people's ego is what goes very, very far. Yeah. And I mean, that's just, I don't know, to me that doesn't feel right,
But you can use those newfound powers for good too.
Exactly. And I guess that's the thing, is like the self-awareness is like
people have, I think, a love-hate relationship with Robert Greene's book of like 48 Laws of Power, but he's like, I think the people that read those books are like responsible enough to not abuse those rules. And they're there. I mean, people that abuse them probably, will abuse them either way, and it's just like it's how you use it. So it's
I think some people are just like, it's a personality flaw to be like, okay, if I learn something I can abuse, or if I'm in a position to abuse something, I'm going to, like, I don't know. It's how do you spot people like that? I think as a lot of us become more experienced in life, we realize that we've dealt with people like that and didn't know we were dealing with people who were very abusive, or like would take an opportunity to abuse others or to take something at the disadvantage of someone else. And I think that's when you're kind of like, whoa, man, the world's kind of wild, and you kind of learn your own responsibility as far as like, okay, I've come into some knowledge. How do I use this for good? And really, what is that good? Is that good for me? Is that good for everyone? Is that good for my family?
Hopefully it's good for both,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, if you can do something good for everyone, you figured it out, but I think everything isn't good for everyone.
Yeah.
I mean, all of that's painting with really broad strokes. But
right. So, I guess one more side tangent from like the hood life. What do you think? Do you think, like, I don't know if this is the right term. This is probably not the right term. Like the gang culture. Are they still as altruistic right now? Because you and I both have seen some fucked up shit, and you hear shootings on the expressway and in the neighborhoods, and sometimes it's like kids being caught up in everything, right? Like a few months ago, there was a drive-by right on Cermak, and the car, I think it was targeted because it was a blue Suburban with black tints, and
it's like, how dare you drive that car?
Yeah, right. And that drove. All I saw was like it driving into a cell phone store, or the wreckage. I didn't even see it happen, but like the office is right here, right?
Yeah.
So like And I've had students' parents call like, "Is it safe in that neighborhood?" I'm like, "Nowhere is safe."
Yeah, like that's real shit though. Like let's be honest, nowhere is safe.
So is it just as protective? Is gang culture still as altruistic? Are they looking out for each other, or is it more senseless? Because I'm such an outsider, right? And not that
Yeah.
saying you're in the gang culture. It's just like I think you're definitely more in tune with it than I am.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say like, I don't know, for lack of a better word, like at some point, like I was gang affiliated. Like I was never in a gang, but
Yeah.
I was always around people
Sure.
who were. And some people would be like, oh, that makes you like, a front or like you're posing or you're false flagging. I never claimed to be that shit, and I never wanted to either. But it's like when you grow around your homies and they're into that, what do you do? Just cut them off? Like maybe I should have. In reality, maybe I should have. But our gangs, as altruistic as they were before, I don't think they ever were, to be honest.
But when you say like you'd rather call your crackhead friend versus the
Yeah.
cops, stuff like that, it's just
Yeah.
like is there a like a purpose to what they're doing? Is there like
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we could really like get into the history of it. Like gang culture, as I understand it, in Pilsen, is Chicago's a very segregated community. And it's kind of by design. Between the viaducts,
Right, right.
the L, the
Redlining,
trains
right,
passing.
right.
Yeah, and I mean it's structural borders between each community. I mean, on Pilsen, you've got 16th Street, which is literally a wall.
University Village versus Pilsen, yeah.
It's a wall all the way through. You've got the Dan Ryan, on your east side.
Yeah.
You've got 55, which blocks us off
The
on
south side,
the south end.
yeah.
And then you've got
Is this
Western.
Western, okay.
Yeah, you've got
Okay.
Western that blocks you off. So like Pilsen, and arguably that's extending to like what's hard Chicago. People always argue about what's Pilsen, what isn't. And now, realtors are involved. So everything's Pilsen.
East Pilsen.
But the way I understood it is that, yeah, East Pilsen's a thing now. Gangs kind of started here to protect the community.
Yeah.
This was originally not a Hispanic community. And when Hispanic people came in, a lot of white flight happened. And then typically when everyone came in...
White flight meaning they leave.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, when Hispanics came in, basically it established as a Hispanic community. There was a lot of tension from... And this is just what was told by me. This is like,
No, yeah.
hood storytelling.
This is your truth. This isn't the truth.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. So a lot of the gangs around here kind of established themselves to protect the community. And, again, that might be a more altruistic kind of statement than it really is. But, people were getting jumped. There used to be a significant amount of projects on the other side of 16th Street on that viaduct. So if you were outside the community, you would get jumped. Even within the community, there's all types of issues. So gangs around here were kind of to protect the people, so to speak, which if you buy into it, whatever, I'm just saying what I was told. But, I think anytime any group comes together, is it for the good of the group? Probably, but is it good for everybody else like we were talking about? Probably not, I mean, establishing gangs and like gang culture, what it is now, I feel like, well, gang culture is very different, than when I was growing up. I think there were kind of like, there were rules, and a lot of those rules have gone away. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen like the Letterman jackets. Like, they're awesome. They used to have like, if you talk to like somebody's uncle, he'll bust it out.
Outward expression of like what
Yeah.
who you're affiliated with.
Yeah, so like on the back, I don't want to use any real gangs, but like, okay, I've got a snake on the back, if you're wearing it, you're actively repping. And the way it used to be, if you were like passing through another neighborhood to like go see a girl or something, if you took it off, they shouldn't mess with you because you're not like actively
Fronting on them.
Yeah, you're not gangbanging in
Yeah,
that territory, like, is that the way it went? Probably not. But, there were sets of rules. I mean, even like when drugs really started coming out here in the streets, a lot of gangs were active and being like, yo, we don't want that. We don't want crack in our neighborhood. We don't want, have you ever heard of Wiki Sticks?
No.
It's embalming fluid. It's
Ooh.
like PCP embalming fluid, and they basically dunk them and smoke them. And, when...
What does it do to people? Just like...
just makes you trip
no.
insanely. Like, I don't know, that stuff's really horrible. But a lot of gangs when I was growing up were actively like, and like, it's not like they were telling me because I was a shorty, but you're around conversations, like they had like policies essentially where it's like, yo, like if you were like tripping on something like this, we're going to tie you up to a pole and you're not going to do anything wild, and like, The stuff like that was like, okay, do gangs still have that? Maybe. I mean, I'm not in tune with it anymore, but at the same time, like, God, I just think with any organization, you need some like,
Structure,
yeah,
mission
governance.
statement.
Yeah, it's some mission statement. We don't smoke crack. But my whole thing is like, I feel like a lot of it now isn't even gang culture anymore. Like, the culture is so large on its own. It's a beast that's grown its own legs. Like, you don't have to be repping something or be affiliated to be out here gang banging. Like, we used to call it like neutrons. Like, basically neutral. You're not affiliated with something. So neutrons basically aren't in gangs. But, if you got checked, like, you're walking down the street, like, oh, what you is, oh, I'm a neutron. They shouldn't mess with you. That's basically saying, like, I don't do anything. Now it's like neutrons gangbang. Like, they will be out here, like, dipping gang signs, doing everything. And it's just like, damn. Like, it's crazy because, like I said, like, gang culture has grown its own legs,
Like what at this? What do you
Pandora's
think
box.
right now? Like, because there's obviously a sense of belonging and community that maybe they weren't getting in their home, right? But like these days, I wonder, like, for these kids, like what's the incentive? Like, you hear, and with kids, there's not much of a punishment or repercussion for things like carjacking and little crimes like that, right? So like the older members might, encourage them, like, you will get a slap on the wrist, we need you to do certain things. And just like, what are these kids' incentives for just carjacking people, jumping people, like holding people at gunpoint? Like, why are they doing this? What are they getting out of this?
I don't know, man. Honestly, like, I think money is a motivator for everything. And I think people do it for money. They do it for props. It comes down to kind of like
Respect.
your egos. Yeah, your respect. Sometimes they're being told to do it. Just go bust a mission. Prove you're down. But I think that's more so like, I would say that's like kind of like more true gang, like you're in a gang type of stuff. Like, we're giving you a mission. You're going to go do this. You're going to go, shoot somebody. You're going to go steal something, prove you're down. But I think it just comes down to like money, man, and like, if we all knew how to make money, we would all get it, but like, is stealing a car the best way to do it? No, you're probably not getting a lot of money off of it. Are people just joyriding them most of the time? Probably, to go do other things, to kind of drive around and slang for a day and ditch the burner. I mean, like, I think you had an experience with that where they like took your car, and when they found it, there were like all types of sketchy things in there.
2 weeks later in Indiana.
It's a burner. It's what they call a burner. They had it. They got to do what they needed with it, and there's no trace back to them.
No.
Like,
They're all like 17, 18-year-olds.
People are just pursuing their own interests, for better or worse. That's my opinion on it.
So what do you think is a possible cure to that? Is it more education? I mean, at that age, like, why do you want to stay in school? Like,
sidewalks.
Is it?
So I had this conversation with Sam recently. I was in Morgantown, West Virginia, and I was like, there's no sidewalks here. Like, I haven't seen a single person. This is crazy. And like, legitimately, like, I don't know, for better or worse, there's too many places to chill. Like, we're all just chilling outside everywhere. Like, everyone's up to different things, and it's cool. It's good. That's why people love Chicago. And this is a totally stupid answer, by the way, but like, we just have too many reasons to be outside. And like, I guess the deeper answer to that, why are we outside? There's things.
Why do you not have things to do?
Exactly. There's people driving people out of their homes if they have them. Situations they can't be in. There's just a lot of reasons. You know what I mean? Like, excuse me. I think at the end of the day, people just kind of want to be free, if that makes sense. Like, there's a lot more freedom being outside, especially when your parents aren't calling you in. People really take for granted the fact that they had a family structure. And I mean, a lot of that is hypocritical on my part because, when I was sneaking out, I wasn't being let out versus some of my friends. Nobody was calling them home. Nobody was asking where they were. My mom would go to sleep and we would sneak out.
No shit.
Sneak out through the window, disable the alarm systems, which is like, we had alarm systems. That says a lot. Like, my mom did very well for herself and for a single mother. But I think a lot of people don't have reasons to be at home, and the question is very like large, like, why is this happening? And it's just like, just take it for what it is. People don't want to be at home, and it's like, okay, but why do they do the things they do when they're
Yeah.
outside? Well, what comes with not being at home? You get hungry, you need money, you want to have fun.
Well,
Well,
the
I
most
can't play
recent
video games
mob
at
event
home.
was like at 31st Street Beach. It's just like all the comments are like, "Why are these babies out at 11 p.m. at night, 2 in the
Yeah.
morning?" And yeah, it's a mixture of like, yeah, like exactly what you said. I mean, there might not be strict rules, and then there are strict rules, and kids gonna be kids in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
So maybe what if you had did your mom ever tell you like these things can happen if you're out at this time?
oh my God. It's
Oh, they
like
did,
a
yeah.
page from her book. She would tell us flat out. She would speak about it like probability. So she would say the more you are out, the more likely something is going to happen to you. When you step outside of that door, your chances go up. When you step outside that door at a certain time, they're through the roof. And one of her big things is you need to be very self-aware. Like I'm very light-skinned,
Mhm.
but I look like something.
Mhm.
I'm very ethnically vague. And, there were just so many instances where like people try to figure out, and a lot of times it's the police, you know what I
Sure.
mean? Yeah, my mom was huge on that. Like you're stepping out of the door and you've just got so many strikes already. And, to speak to that, some people have a lot more. So you have to be aware of that, and the way the world kind of will interact with you. We take it a lot as we're interacting with the world. The world's interacting with us. We're being tossed around as everyone sees
Yeah.
fit. But yeah, my mom was huge on that. Like, I think one of her big things was like, she didn't want us out late at night. It was always like, come home for dinner. And then we got to an age where it's like, all right, we're not coming home for dinner anymore. And there's some parents that are kind of like, okay, well, I'm locking the doors. And I think she tried that. We snuck out. And it just kind of got to the point where it's like, I can't control you guys. And I think she turned to my grandfather to kind of reel us in on a lot of things, because just Hispanic culture, and I think a lot of cultures in general, you respect your elders.
Yeah.
And that just compounds more as you go up and up and up the ladder. So, he would reel us in, and I think we would kind of chill out, and then, we'd wild out again, but
I guess in your personal experience, like, what do you think was the catalyst for you to turn it around?
Dropping out of school.
That was a wake-up call?
Yeah, I think like when I left school, it was just like a lot of things going on at that time, and I was just kind of like, man, like this isn't for me. My brother went to an alternative school at that point. I stayed and I finished in a 4-year high school, which one isn't better than the other, but to me, I kind of just set up this goal for myself. Like, no, I'm gonna pretty much do the time, do summer school, kind of punish myself, and I think that turned it around where I knew what I needed to do. Did I necessarily do it? Not so much. I got to where I am now. So yeah, I did it ultimately, and kind of baby steps. You don't do it overnight. But I think for me, that was a big turnaround, just kind of exposure outside of the community too. Like going to UIC was really cool, because that was the first time I had like this culture shock where it's like, dude, this is blocks away from my house.
Yeah.
Like I grew up on 19th and Racine.
What do you mean, culture shock in the sense of like different people?
Yeah, like interacting with people and kind of just chilling with them,
Yeah,
and
'cause
just
it's huge
learning
commuter school, right? So you got a bunch of
what normal people do, like
normal.
I mean, like I think the thing that was like kind of crazy is like, I don't know, take drinking for example. It's not like, I think everybody was coming into it and experiencing it at that time versus like, man, like I had been drinking before I was even a teenager, like for better or worse, like I had a lot of bad experiences, and to see people kind of having like positive experiences, not that it's all positive experiences, but just kind of like the culture shock of like the way I've always seen it isn't the way it actually is. Experience, I guess, culture shock, meeting new people, and kind of what their experience, what their relationships were like with things I already had a predetermined relationship with, like smoking weed and just watching Netflix versus like smoking weed and like going out and being crazy and like doing illegal things, like just kind of like pumping the brakes. Like that was a huge turnaround for me. And I think like honestly just kind of just realizing like in my own relationship, like I just didn't want to like run crazy anymore, you know what I mean? Like settling down and just kind of like I would say I'm a spiritual person. I'm not a religious person, but like people always say like count your blessings. Like I had a lot of good things that I just like took for granted, like even talking about like people had reasons to not be home. I had every reason to be in my house, and I was still just like out here, for no damn reason. But I just think, yeah, kind of like stop taking things for granted is really what turned things around for me. And like also my kid, like I've got two kids now, but when I had Noah, a lot of it just became like build, and that was like straight out of high school. Like I graduated 2010, he was born October 2012, so you figure like I had 1 year out, and it was just like straight to having a kid. But I don't know, man, is my advice for everyone, go have a kid, and as a teenager, hope you get your shit together.
That's the cure.
Yeah, we just
have a kid, guys.
all need to have kids.
I'm sure
younger.
A lot of them have kids. Kids fucking parenting kids,
Yeah. I don't know, man. Like even just kind of thinking about that, like Sam and I are probably like an exception rather than, the actual case all across the board. Like it's hard as hell to be a teen parent, like emotionally, and just kind of like financially. There's just so many factors, you know what I mean? Yeah, go have a kid. Everybody in doubt, go have a kid right now.
So reel it back in. I mean, so we're at Northwestern together, right? And
yeah, we got far off from Northwestern.
It was a pleasant surprise.
Northwestern's listening to the podcast like, damn, we don't want to be affiliated with this.
Yeah, I mean, what were your thoughts on that role? Was it a nice change in pace? Like what was it?
It was dope. I mean, I really liked it. I think we had really great mentors there. I mean, it was a role that I think I just kind of like thrived in personally, not to like toot my own horn, but like you learn everything on the job.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of up to you as much as you want to do or as little as you want to do. Like there's a very high skill cap for like what an anesthesia tech is capable of. And there's also a very low bar at the same time where it's like, all right, came in, sploosh, sploosh, splash your cords, I'm out. But then like when you're working like weekends, for example, when you're juggling, CVORs, you're helping with transplants, start cases, and you got traumas downstairs, it's like, man, like that's when you're real like, obviously there's a scope for what we can do, I was going to say something off the record, but, do you always stick to the scope? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
absolutely, guys.
No, but I just think it was like a really dope role for like growing, you know what I mean? It's a career if you want it to be. I would say
that's what Alex and mainly Alex, but I guess Marty as well, who's been in it for several decades now. But both Alex and I we interviewed together, and I walk in, I'm just being like my bubbly self, like, oh, how's it going? I'm Victor. Yeah. And
kiss me.
And Alex, like in his head, he'll tell you this. He's like, is this guy like interviewing for my job? But we both got the job, and we both.
Oh, you were interviewing against each other.
That's what we thought, right? Yeah. And no, but they had met several positions, and while we were sitting, they put us in an empty OR to read the anesthesia book, and
I remember doing
filling
that.
out all these fucking forms and shit.
So cold.
And yeah,
it's so cold. I thought it was psychological torture. I was like, oh man, they're really trying to see if I can like hack it right now.
And I ask him, I'm like, oh, how long do you think you'll be here for? And he's like, forever. And I'm like, oh, I'm only here for 3 years, and it's almost been like it's been over 5 years now.
Yeah.
And at the time, I still had pre-PA aspirations, physician assistant. So this was like a stepping stone to get more patient care experience, because at the time the ambulance job wasn't cutting it as far as paycheck. So this was a lot more money, less responsibility in a way, and which is one reason why Anthony didn't like it, because you're a fresh paramedic and you don't have any patient care. Like what am I doing? Right?
Let me do the wild stuff.
So 5 years later, it's just like I'm still there, and I'm there because I get to work with people like Alex, right? Yeah. And it's also like my very, very safety net. Like if everything else in my life fails, like I still have that.
That's the same way I felt about it.
Okay.
I had a hard time leaving it, and it got to the point where like they were like, look, we're not pressuring you, but you got to give us like 1 day at least so we can keep you on a roster just from like
Gotcha.
a corporate standpoint. And I couldn't give it to them just because of the travel, like I couldn't commit to a schedule.
So you were already doing sales at this point?
Yeah,
So
I stayed on for like
why
almost.
did you think? Yeah, you did.
Yeah, almost like a year.
That's
I mean,
what
I wasn't
ultimatum, I
working
know.
frequently. I would just kind of
It was
pop
it was a
up,
pleasant surprise when you did pop up,
yeah.
right?
I know. It felt like
on
so
the days that we
heartwarming.
both popped up at the same time. It's like, oh, okay, that's
Yeah,
cool.
when the squad was rolling deep.
Yeah, no, when that happens, it's like it's really good times.
Yeah.
And
And I think people feel comfortable too. Like, all other things aside, as far as like us all liking hanging out, like
Even the
job
CRNAs,
got
the
done
residents,
very well.
yeah.
They knew they had great support. Like, I remember going there and they'd be like, "You're here," and it's like, "Yeah, let me mess something up." I'm just joking.
Why did you feel? I guess kind of segue to the sales. Like, why did you feel like you still needed a safety net?
I guess because like numbers can always change. Like we had a very good year last year. Now it's very slow. I mean, luckily I make a salary that I'm comfortable with, but a lot of other sales jobs, the salary's small compared to what your commissions are. Yeah, with this it's very
Do you like
balanced.
the commission kind of structure?
I do. They keep changing it, and that's just sales. They change it every single year. I do. I'm happy with it. In my role, I'm not true sales. I'm what's called a clinical specialist. So I'm a clinical specialist for anesthesia, and it's nice because I'm included on commissions. A lot of times you aren't as a non-salesperson.
Are you more of like a consultant for them in a way?
So I would say I'm like education, and we don't have a true sales team, which is also part of it. We just recently hired people for sales. They're what's called territory managers, and they pursue opportunities, basically.
Yeah.
We didn't have territory managers before, so I was functioning in both roles, which I feel like is probably why they compensated us very well on commissions. But, I mean, I like it. I love my job. Next year, is it going to be different from a commission standpoint? Maybe, but that's the thing with sales from everything I've understood. Mind you, I've only been in it 2 years. It feels like forever, but in those 2 years, you do a lot of work. They could change a lot next year, so I just kind of feel like a safety net is important.
How is it like traveling? You travel a lot, right? Like, how is it that with being a dad? Like, how is it?
It was really hard, especially seeing Luna. I mean, she's my baby, so like not being around her, I would be like in my hotel room, like that Wolverine meme. It would just be me with
Laying in
Luna,
bed, yeah.
And then I'd scroll past Noah and be like, "You're cool too." I mean, like that was my baby. Like I had an Android and switched to iPhone just so I could FaceTime her.
Oh, wow.
And that's commitment in the 21st or 2022. But she had a really hard time with it, which made me have a really hard time with it. Travel is cool to people who don't have to do it. Like when you're doing travel that you want to do, it's completely different than when you're being forced
like
to
attendant.
travel.
Yeah,
exactly. Like flight attendants will probably feel the same way. Like the travel that they do that they want to do, like I'm sure they love, but the travel they do that they're forced to do, they probably pretend is cooler on Instagram. Which I mean, the same degree, you try to make the most out of what you're doing. Like I love eating places when I'm traveling for work, but do I like to travel? No. If it was up to me, I would be at home or traveling with my kids. It's a different type of travel. Like let's just say it that way. Traveling for work is not traveling for pleasure. You can make it that, but I feel like you're fronting at the end of the day. Like
you're just putting on a mask.
Exactly. Or you don't take work home with you. My travel is different because I go back to my hotel room and now it's office hours versus like, if someone, I mean, like a flight attendant is a good example. I don't know their role specifically, but I think when they go back to their hotel, it's kind of like, all right, this is your time now versus like, I fell behind on work by being on assignment,
Okay. So to bring it full circle, like what are your ingredients to cultivate a sense of fulfillment in any industry? In I guess the industries you've been a part of.
I think for me, and I mean that's all I can really speak to is like I just want to pursue every opportunity. Like they're not all going to be great ones. I've taken roles when I left Northwestern. The role I was in, I liked my job, but I found it very difficult to be in like administration or in management. Was prior to going into sales.
Because you went to UFC.
Yeah,
Holy
I was
shit.
in a leadership role there, and I just found leadership it's very different than, not from what I expected there. the team we had at Northwestern was not the team that I inherited
Yeah.
at the other place. And, you know, they're both great in their own ways, but, oh man, do you want to be the person that's picking up that phone for every call off? I mean, just think of any job you've worked. Do you want to be the person having to deal with the results of someone calling off every day?
Yeah.
Some people do. Some people like it.
Right,
There's
but
benefits to it.
what's tough is you're in that leadership position, but what if you're not in the position to let go of the people that consistently call off?
And that's the thing, your leadership, but your leadership, you get reminded very quickly of how far your reach really is or how much power you really have. And you start to realize why things are the way they are very quickly.
You're more of a
places.
babysitter then.
Exactly.
Mm.
Yeah, exactly. A babysitter without the authority to discipline the people you are, or the children, if we're going with the analogy. Yeah, that is a perfect analogy. The
Yeah.
babysitter cannot discipline the children outside
Ah.
of what the parents allow them to do. Like, if you come home to your
Yeah,
babysitter
that
and it's
is.
like your child is like, I don't know, what's like a really horrible punishment? Not watching cartoons, no iPad. And you didn't say, hey, take away their iPad if, you know, you don't like the way they talk to you, you know, just keeping it mild. You're going to be like, whoa, I didn't say you could take away their iPad. Like, that makes them happy, you know? But, like, it's a good analogy because it's
Yeah.
like the babysitter does not have the parental authority unless the parental authority is like, go ape shit.
Right.
Do what you want.
Right. We're currently experiencing something where several people have come up to management to share negative experiences about someone who's not pulling their weight.
Dude, that's so important.
But then the management is like, you know, you didn't come to me soon enough. Where's the evidence? And as far as evidence go, apparently you can get fired for recording someone on your phone. You yourself can be fired
Yeah,
for
you're
that.
on your phone. I had that experience, and I was like, what do you want me to do? You're both going to get in trouble. You're on your phone recording this person. I get it. But then it also turned out the call that they were making, they were on work, but it was related to something medical. And it's like, did you just record someone having a private conversation? First of all, did they know you were in the room? You recorded them, and they're discussing a personal medical matter. Like, this is sounding more like you're going to get in trouble. And
Shit.
do you want me to pursue this? Like, because this could end really bad for everybody.
And yeah. So I mean, what was even frustrating is like when the initial person who came forward was accused of being a racist, when that's such a blanket statement,
Yeah.
and when you're just talking about one person and not a whole race in general, like how can you be? So he was shook, and he asked his other coworkers, "Can you back me up?" Because he knows everyone thinks the same thing.
It's
and
like,
he's
do you all want to get in the line
"Can
of
we
fire?
yeah, essentially. But several people actually came together
Yeah.
and brought it up to management, and still nothing. And they're like, my hands are tied. It's just
Yeah.
like, come on.
That balance is really hard between like legitimate racism in the workplace and like what people perceive as someone like playing the race card.
Yeah.
You know, and both exist, you know.
Sure.
But I just think a situation like that is like, oh my God, from a management or like supervisor standpoint, like, oh my God, this is so hard to deal with.
I imagine you tread carefully, right?
Very
And,
carefully. And that's the
it's
thing.
easy to
In
cancel
those
people,
roles,
right? But yeah.
in those roles, you always have to tread very carefully because I think when you even dip down to, not down, that's the wrong word, but when you're acting as if you're not someone's
one of them.
supervisor
Yeah.
or someone's kind of authority figure, it's going to bite you. Like,
Yeah.
it's definitely going to bite you when the wrong person is in the room.
If you're playing favorites and stuff
Exactly.
like that. Right,
Yeah. I
right.
mean, if you're playing, just don't play, you know,
Right.
playing favorites, playing
Be objective,
games.
yeah.
Just go in there dry as possible. That's when you will have the best results. Like, but it's also like, is that how you want to live? I mean, a good amount of our life is spent working, so it's a significant amount of your life that you're just like dry. You know what I mean? And again, you know, like we were talking about earlier, what's soul crushing to you and what isn't? You know, I think I'm like a super playful person as much as like I can be serious, but like, I don't know, you come home and it's kind of hard to wind down from that role. You know, like, I don't know, like method acting, you know, like they've done like all the, I think it's called method acting. Like they've done all this research about how people like
Get into
become
it.
those characters
Yeah.
and can't get out of it. Like, why is our daily life any different when you're essentially being fake, you know, like to be this like stern figure? You're going to go home and kind of, it's hard to turn that off. You can do it. Like, I don't know. I think for me, like a huge decompression, I think a lot of us do is like just sitting in your car for a bit. I go home and I'm just like,
sit there, yeah.
just zoning out. You know, like literally thinking about everything and nothing at the same time is just so important. But that's also like meditation in a way, you know. Is it like
Yeah.
common practice meditation? You know, I think that's more what it is than like actual like, you know, having your mantra or your phrase. But like I will just sit there and just be like, take it away, Spotify. We need a quick 5 to 10 minutes. But yeah.
So, for you personally, like, what have you found in every role that you've had? Like, what has contributed to you feeling like lit up and very present in your role? And to me, like, some things that come to mind are things like, is there an opportunity? Like, do you feel challenged in your role?
That's important.
Do your decisions make an impact? Do they have weight?
Yeah, I think all those things are important. There's kind of like things that are related to the role that make you feel very like, kind of like accomplished or fulfilled.
Yeah.
There's things non-related to the role. Like, you know, obviously a paycheck is everyone's motivation. You can say it's not, but at the end of the day, it's what provides you with the things that are important to you.
It's the most objective way to measure success, but fulfillment through that, you know, comes from a lot of not skills, but like other, you know, non-objective ways, things that are hard to measure.
Yeah.
So aside from like feeling challenged, the ability, depending on who you are, to be creative,
Yeah.
right? How much flexibility.
And that was a huge part of me that I felt like I've kind of let go of recently, like
You don't
creativity.
need to be.
I need to be.
You need
And
to be.
That's like a huge point you're speaking to is like, so Noah got I bought him the VR headset.
No, I saw that. You were having a good time.
Yeah, I mean, like I came out of that thing like, wow.
You were on your tippy toes at one point.
My mom, she was there while I was using it, and she's like, "You look like you're ready to light a cigarette and go to sleep." She's like, "You look very satisfied with having painted."
You gotta watch. Mark Zuckerberg posted an Instagram today about he's trying out like different qualities of what a VR headset can accomplish. So
Yeah.
things like tracking your eyes and changing the focus, things that are being blurry and things that are in focus, making things more tactile, right? If you grab something, do you feel it in your hand?
Yeah.
If you shook someone's hand, can you feel that, right?
Yeah.
Because
And that's the
sitting
thing
in
that-
a Zoom meeting is not the same as sitting across from someone. Like I would never host an episode over Zoom.
Yeah.
And if you can use VR and you can look, you know, you can have that like real world feeling. It's crazy.
Well, my son took it off, and when he took it off, I was like, "Isn't this VR crazy?" And he's like, "This is normal." What do you mean? And I was like, "Well, which is cooler?"
Did you ever take him to Justine's cousin went to Old Orchard to do that VR? There's a VR like center.
Oh, is it
gaming
like
center.
one where you can like run on it
There's
and
a space.
everything?
It used to be like a Macy's or something like that.
Yeah.
Now it's just like an open floor plan.
No, I got to check it out.
Yeah.
But there's also like age restrictions on a lot of that stuff. Like I had to
I'm
be
sure Noah would be
very-
qualified.
Yeah. Plus Noah, he's a tall kid. Yeah, and that kid is like, wow.
You know what I loved? How you guys set him up with like a cooking thing. That
Yeah.
shit's
So my
fun.
brother did that.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. My
Okay,
brother,
okay.
as a Christmas present, him and his wife were like so thoughtful. Which in reality, it's always our wives. They like plan
Yeah,
the presents
absolutely.
and everything.
Absolutely.
So they got him something called Radish Kids.
Love it.
So that's not a plug. That's just facts.
Sponsor us, Radish Kids.
So it's really cool. They send you like a like cooking. Would it just be
Yeah.
called like a utensil? So
Well,
like
it's kind of like you can get this for adults too, like HelloFresh. Like you can get
yeah. So,
pre-packaged amounts of ingredients, and you just throw shit together.
so they didn't do the ingredients, and
Oh.
at first I was like, oh, that's whack. But then it's cool because like I'm really big on cooking too, and getting your ingredients is a huge part
It
of
is.
cooking.
That's
So when I was
different.
like, thank you for not getting this, because going to the grocery store and even just
Part of the
raising your
process.
kids, exactly, like we would go and he would pay, he would do like, I mean, even just teaching your kids all the
How to
things.
look for good
Yeah,
quality.
knock on the watermelon, all the little things, sniff the navel, you know, looking like a weirdo in the supermarket. Teaching them all those things is part of the experience. So like I thought it was dope. Like it was
Yeah.
something like we would just do on the weekends, and like even when I was gone, it was cool because like Sam would like cook with them
Mm.
all day long, and it would just be like, damn, like they're busy, you know, like excuse me. It's a lot easier to not miss somebody when you're occupied. I think like when you're at home, it's like, I wonder what they're doing, you know, and just knowing that like they were occupied so they weren't missing me as much
Yeah.
made my life a lot easier. You know what I
Sure,
mean, especially
sure.
doing like weekend jobs. Oh my God.
Well, you're just happy that now you have such a full like personal life too.
Yeah,
It's just
it's kind of dope. I mean, I feel like I'm at the point I've always wanted to be and never thought I would. You know, like I guess I have this conversation with my mom a lot. I knew I would get to a good place, but I doubted it at the same time, if that kind of makes sense.
doubted it. And did you ever feel like, is there anything else out there?
Yeah, definitely. And like, again, you know, I just hit a lot of crossroads where it's like, okay, this is the sure path to like success. You know what I mean? And not success in a, you know, financial or materialistic way, but this is a path to success as far as having the basic things that I need and being able to actually enjoy those to the extent that I want. You know, living in a house that I want to live in, you know, just they're not
You're
basic
you're
things,
living
but they're
life on your terms
necessities.
now.
Exactly. You know, I don't want to say like quality of life because, you know, if you're living that's good quality of life already, in my
that's true.
opinion. You know what I mean? But just kind of like the extra things. You know, I cared about the extras that were important. But yeah, I don't know, man. Like, it's just such a trip to be at this place. Like, this point in life, I feel like I'm kind of like, all right, here comes the midlife crisis because I'm checking off way too many things, but it makes me so happy. You know, like when I bought the first car that I really wanted, like at that point I didn't have my grandfather anymore, but we always used to joke that he drove a pimp wagon. Like he always had these like Cadillacs and like, you know, these very nice cars. I was like, man, I want him to drive in my pimp wagon, you know, but like just hitting those places, they're essentially dreams, you know, like as corny as it sounds, but like making your dreams come true is like, wow, that's fulfilling. That's like super fulfilling. And you know, I don't know, a lot of it, it's like, is it materialistic? Sure, but like I enjoy like going out to dinner with my family. Is that materialistic? Not really. Like
Nah.
I just think there's like a lot of like, I don't know, I guess I kind of like feel guilty sometimes for like being like, oh, I'm enjoying having money now, but it's like, but this is what I wanted. Like,
Yeah.
I've been broke for so long.
Yeah, who was it? It wasn't it was a guy that does finance. Not Rich Dad Poor Dad, but like I think he wrote the book I Will Teach You How to Be Rich or something like that. But like one of his statements was like become very self-aware of like what you get a lot of joy and enjoyment from. And but then be merciless and cut out the things that don't bring you joy. So
Absolutely.
whether that's, and be very specific, so whether that's like taking one vacation every year and sitting in first class on that trip, or, and like you said earlier, the ability to not look at your receipt when you go to you want to shop at Whole Foods and not be worried about what you're spending at Whole Foods. Identify what brings you joy and then do what you got to do to make that money.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess the hard thing to it too is like time wise, you know, oh God, my brother had told me something and it kind of blew my mind. I feel like it's a very common saying, but it's like something like when you have the time, you don't have the money. When you have the money, you don't have the time. And then I think there's like a third part that's more uplifting. That's just kind of like the bummer to it. But I don't know. I think like even like now Sam and I are trying to like strike a balance. Like again, traveling for me is kind of like I travel too much. Like I enjoy being at home, and it's work travel. You know, it drains your cup. You know, and personal travel fills your cup. So it's kind of like when we start talking about trips, it's like, don't make me do that. You know, like, but we've kind of been talking about it, and it's like, well, that's what's fulfilling for her. And I think like you have to kind of understand that like fulfillment's different for everybody. You know what I mean? And it's like sometimes I'll sit there and I'll be like, damn, I really don't want to do this. But it's like, okay, you know, if it fulfills you, it's important to you, you're important to me, fine. Let's do it, you know. But like obviously there's priorities too. Like, dude, we're just about to buy this house, and like, my God, it's just been months of stress. Like, oh my God, it's insane to buy a house right now. And like the thing that's crazy is like, I guess like money is all like relative too. Like I feel like I have a good amount of money. And like going into like some of the houses, it's like, okay, I need a loan for part of this. And other people are like, no, we got that cash. And it's like, okay, how do I compete with someone dishing out this much money cash, you know, like, but I feel like the market's kind of chilling out a little bit now. Hopefully. There's a lot more inventory out there.
I mean, I'm starting to feel that like money conversation, especially planning a wedding and kind of thing. And
Dude, we canceled our wedding.
Alex
I
told
think I
me.
forgot to tell you that. Yeah.
Alex told me.
Not to cut you off, but it's like, oh
it was
shit,
like
let me
gonna
remind
be
you.
like a party or something like that
Yeah.
instead of like a whole wedding.
We're going to do like a house party, which is like, we're some house party motherfuckers, so it's going to be better anyway.
Well, that's what Stingy was saying. Her ideal wedding is, well, first just buying her dream home.
Yeah.
And then having the wedding in the
Filling
backyard.
it up with all the things that are important to you.
So, yeah.
And when I say things, I mean everything,
Right,
you know?
right.
I guess people aren't things, but, you know, you want to fill it up with the people you love, the things you love, the food you love, and it's like, I think there's more ability to do that in your home versus like a lot of venues. I mean, like, and plus we're buying like a big ass house. Like we want to fill it with people, otherwise there's no point.
Yeah, that's crazy. How much people dish out for that. But if you got it, you know, why not?
Yeah. Sorry, I cut you off, but how is the wedding planning going?
It's been fun. I mean, we're seeing Bridgeport Art Center
nice.
on Thursday. But yeah, it makes you think. It's like all this money could be a down payment, you know? So makes you think. And it's it's not just my decision. If she really wants it, then whatever, you know, we'll make it happen. But
you're already sounding like a husband. It's not my decision. You could just stop there.
It's not solely my decision, right? And I don't want her to feel like because when I say it's your wedding, you can do what you want. She's like, it's our wedding.
That's good.
Because she's been there. I mean, not to speak for Justine, but the last relationship was like very absentee to the point where it's like, let's go ring shopping. And while we're doing that, she's doing all the picking and choosing, and then he's just on his phone in the corner, right? So you don't want to do that either, right?
Yeah.
This is definitely a partnership. So yeah, I mean, it's a fun process so far. What is difficult is like, who makes that guest list, because it just gets...
Dude, the guest list is so stressful.
It gets really long very fast.
Yeah. I think like the hard thing for me was like grouping. Like there's like certain groups where like
you'd rather have friends than family, right? It's
yeah.
like, damn.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, like my immediate family, it's no questions asked, but like I think when I start getting to like, you know, we're Hispanic, so everyone's our cousin. Yeah. Like our cousin's cousin, you know, but like how do you...
Someone said like if they've never been your home or don't plan to be in your home, like as a over dinner, right? Like, should they come?
Well, like Sam's thing was like, oh, if we haven't talked to them in a few months, and I want to be like, it's a pandemic, or it was a pandemic. Like I have not talked to very close friends for some time. A lot of people moved away from the city too. Like just the age we're at, a lot of people's lives are very in flux right now and changing. Like I'm not going to hold it against somebody. So that for me, that was a bad rule. But ultimately, what we just came down to is like who we're gonna have fun with. You know, like we pretty much put together a list that was just like non-judgmental. Like everybody on there is just good people, cool people, our people. I think the thing that was actually harder was like a lot of family, because it's like, oh, how do you say you're cool, you're not, you're cool? Because like, so like some of my second cousins, you know, like I'm close to them, but then there's like the younger siblings where it's like, I'm not paying for your plate. And like the thing is, you still look at a lot of family like, oh, you're a little kid, but they're actually like 25 now, you know, 21 now, and it's just like, I'm still not paying for your chicken tenders even if you are 25. You know? But like there's just like certain family members, there's more of like a generational divide. Like I'm closer to...
Both my parents are youngest of 7, so we're the youngest out of all the cousins, and there is that generational gap.
Yeah, where you feel more like you're talking to like an aunt or an uncle or something, you know?
Yeah. So we're navigating that right now, and I think it's a good place to start, because that dictates, you know, how much food you'll need, what space can hold you, kind of thing. So
yeah, you need the number, man. It's all about that number, you know, like, and I think we had like a rough number. We're going big, and then we started looking at pricing for that number, and we were like, oh, give us like half of that.
I did not know it'd be like 100 per head.
Dude, the plates, like you just want to be like, this better be the best macaroni and cheese ever, and dino nuggets. No,
and you know, and who was it? Alex's brother Frank was just like, yeah, and some people RSVP'd yes, and they just didn't show up. Dude, no excuse. It's just like, come on.
That's the thing I dread. Like, so like Ricky. We had invited Ricky, and I had actually already had the conversation with Sam. I was like, he's dating someone seriously now. Like, I have to invite her. And she was like, okay, would you pay for her plate personally? And I was like, yes, that's my friend's girlfriend.
Yeah.
And she was like, look, what we're going to have to do for like some like +1 type of things is like after we're done serving the plates, because it just makes it more expensive, you know. Once we start dancing, when drinks are poured, like, have them come through the back door. And I was like, yes, the hood way. like hood to the very end, you know. I was like,
awesome.
yeah, cool, we won't pay for a plate. But then we were also planning on doing like taco trucks at the end of the night. And it's
Mason
like,
did it perfectly.
dude, that was so dope. That's where we got the idea
Al
from.
Patron, yeah.
Yep. And they
Oh,
were so
man.
good too.
Those are bomb
That was a
tacos.
really fun wedding.
Yeah, I mean, and imagine if you didn't have to pay for the venue and you just did it in your backyard.
Yeah, I mean, I think our backyard is like the size of the venue now.
Yeah.
So the only thing that sucks is I'm pretty much gonna lose the deposit on like the planner, on the venue.
Oh, so you had all that stuff. Oh, shit.
Yeah, shit. No problem wasting my money. Yeah, but you know, we had put some deposits down, but ultimately I think like for the stress that it's saving, just better, you know, like, because our closing date's the 30th, and then we were planning on having this wedding in October. So like, I mean, there's just not even month wise, week wise, it's like that's too stressful, man. You know, like I didn't want to do that to her. So the minute she started kind of like, this is a little too much, I was like, look, if you don't want to do it, that's fine. You know, like sometimes I think I drag my feet a little bit more, and it's like, let's just do it. You know, you want to. And it's also like, I guess being a supportive partner too is like, you have to support your partner even in their like uncertainty. If today it's a yes and tomorrow it's a no, like I'm down for it, you know. Like I think being rigid or being like, yesterday you told me you didn't want it and now you do is like, it's not fair. We're all just
and yeah,
it's a
open-minded,
huge
yeah.
stressful thing, and I think you should be
Supportive.
allowed to change your mind on things
Yeah.
on a day-to-day. Like for us canceling our wedding, it wasn't like, I'm not marrying you.
No, it's not
It's
even-
like,
yeah.
we're married already, girl.
Yeah.
For better, or what? I was gonna say for better or worse. No, till death do we part. I guess both are true. For better or worse, girl.
That's amazing.
Yeah. No, it's cool. I mean, like, I don't know. I think the thing that's kind of like crazy about like marriage is like we're in a very different generation than our parents. Where like the marriage like signified like we're moving in, we're starting the family, and like I think like our generation dates so heavily, not like in the sense of like dating a bunch of people, but like when you're dating someone and it's going in that direction, like
You're already
you're
moving in
essentially
kind of
married,
thing,
dog.
yeah.
Like
I know, yeah.
like
So what changed after you got married?
taxes and insurance. I mean, and as much as I'm joking, like you're marrying Uncle Sam. Like that is really what it is, bro. And like I think ultimately the reason we decided like let's just put it on paper, because we were never like too stressed about it. We're like, okay, we'll just get around to it eventually. I mean, like honestly, I feel like it was an errand that we're not running for a long time. Not to downplay marriage, but just like it was something we wanted to do. We just weren't making like the time or the date, and eventually we just eloped, went to City Hall, filled out paperwork, which is like, hello, that's what an errand sounds like.
Yeah.
You know? So we essentially just kind of like ran that errand that day. Yeah, but honestly, it's the government getting involved in your business, you know, like, and not to be like all like, get out of my business, you know, like, I hate you, Uncle Sam, but you're just bringing the government into your relationship, and, you know, you just leverage certain things. But I think the thing that, excuse me, Sam and I talked about a lot is just like kind of the biological difference, and like, there's a huge biological difference as far as like time and commitment between men and women that men were just so like dopey about and never even factor. Women have to have children by a certain point. And I'm not saying they have to like
But if they
forcing
want
them
to.
Yeah, correct. If they want to, there is a clock. And I mean, now studies show for men there's also a significant clock where, you know, I don't want to get icky, you know, but we have a clock too to a certain point,
Okay.
you know. But I think like not enough men are aware of that or respectful of that, especially when you're dating someone. You need to make your intentions very clear, like what your
You're in
plan
your late
is.
20s, early 30s, mid 30s. It's just
Yeah.
like, come on. What if someone told me like if you're with someone for at least 6 months and they're in that age range, like you owe them a kid.
Exactly.
If they want a kid, right?
Exactly.
Like, yeah.
And it's like, again, you know, you try to be like very mindful about like how you phrase it, but like if a woman wants to have a child and she is dating you and she wants to have a child with you, you know, it's just kind of like respectful, especially if this is like your partner.
What
like
an
have
honor.
that conversation, you know, like what's your timeline look like?
Yeah.
You have to like normalize talking about timelines, for important things. And I think for something like this, like again, it just comes down to like men, we're too dopey. Like,
True.
we'll have a kid when we're ready. Meanwhile, like
Just fucking around left and right.
exactly, like our girls looking at us like that's what you think, and this is getting significantly harder. And I think that's also like kind of like where I'm at in my life too, is like health all of a sudden it just kicks down your door, like, and it's just like now you have to start paying attention to a lot of things, like even working in EMS, like all of a sudden you start feeling that ache in your back, and it's like, damn, I know exactly on what patient that happened and I didn't address it the way I should have. But like, I don't know, I guess your priorities are just different when you're older, where it's like let's start taking care of ourselves and taking care of the people around us, from a different standpoint of like my health and their health, and their, I don't know, maybe other people this was just normal conversations to them, but it's not like anything I really learned from like my parents to have these conversations. Dating's like, find a good person, marry that good person, and that's the criteria. But I think there's just like so much more to unpack. Like I think like sex education, we do such a poor part of that, and like maybe we just misphrase it. Like we should just have relationship education, like the same way we have education and everything else. How to not gaslight people, like these are all things you have to go and like learn as an adult on your own to be like, holy shit, this is what was going on.
But now that you know all these things, is there a way to weave that into your kids?
Yeah, I think my kids are like, I mean, not to toot our own horns, but my kids are super well adjusted. Like, I don't know if that's the right word, but it's what came to mind. Like,
well-rounded, and
they're good people. I mean, like, man, I'm just trying to think. There's like so many examples of just like Luna. So like, Luna is just like very like innocent and like and I think as an adult your view on the world is like race is like huge, just kind of being aware of things. She was at the playground and there were two African American little boys playing, and she went up to one, was playing with them, talking to him, and then she went up to the other one and she was like, is that your brother? And I think like Sam like cringed, like, okay, two people of the same race doesn't mean they're related, it's just like uncomfortable to talk about. And then he was like, oh, why'd you say that? And she's like, because you guys have the same haircut, and walks away. Like nothing about like skin color or anything. And like, part of that is like, people always say like the whole I don't see race thing, which is like
your
you
lens, right? Like through your perspective. And like, oh, it's a color thing. Oh, it's a hair thing, actually.
Yeah, and like, for us, I feel like it's like you need to see race. It's an important part of conversations to acknowledge someone's identity. But like for kids, just to see they're so like innocent, just to be like, oh, it's two dark-skinned boys playing together, they're siblings. No, it's like two kids with the same haircut.
Amazing.
But no, I just feel like my kids we've made a lot of choices in parenting, and I feel like it's just doing so well for them. Like when we were looking at schools, we both went to like entirely Hispanic oh, excuse me. So we both went to entirely Mexican schools, pretty much, not in Mexico, but like everyone there was from Mexico, the kids, or their parents were from Mexico. And we just kind of made the choice, like, we want more diverse education, as far as like who they're around. So we actually, when we were looking at schools, like you can pull up like pie charts.
The breakdown,
the breakdown. And it was a pretty involved process. We did like selective enrollment for NOAA, and like you have to get waitlisted. You essentially get assigned like a lottery number. And we like literally sent him to the most diverse school we could send him to, and like it's just like done so well for him. Like
nice.
I don't hear any ignorant comments out of his mouth, and like it's not that I'm dense, it's just that he's very aware. Like the way he expresses himself, like even when everything like we were talking about was going on with the police, my mother-in-law is a police officer. She's been a police officer for like 20 years. We just had like an honest conversation with her and with us at the table. Like, so why is this happening? And I think even she was pretty straightforward to say, there are some bad police out there, and I think that was like 2 years ago already that a lot of this was happening. So he was 7 at the time, and he's like, well, police, their job is to find bad guys, right? And it's like very like surface level, but then like just kind of like his approach to it, to even like be able to like analyze things like, well, is everyone that they think a bad guy really a bad guy? And it's like, damn, kid, like you're having some profound thoughts at a very young age. And then like there's other levels to it too, where like I feel like both of my kids kind of think from like a very I don't want to say non-conformist because that sounds very like corny, but like sometimes we watch kids movies and they're rooting for the villain because they're like, that's not wrong. Like what they're saying makes a lot of sense. I mean, Noah's like, I don't know. They amaze me in like how critical they are sometimes in their thought from like a little human. You know, it's so amazing. But like, you know, sometimes Sam and I are just like, where do they get all of this from? And like, you know, of course our moms, everyone's mom thinks the world of them. They're like, they get all their brilliant thoughts from you. And it's like, no, like these kids, I really feel like they're like gifted. And everyone thinks that of their kids, but I'm right about mine. Yeah, I mean, like everybody, you know, thinks they have the most beautiful, brilliant children in the world. And like, I don't know, I'm kind of at a point where it's like respecting people's perspective. We all do. Like kids are just great. They're so amazing, you know, just to see like their thoughts and actions, you know, like it's all what you teach them. There's a certain amount of like temperament, how they approach things that are just, I feel like, natural to humans overall. But like, I don't know, kids are just so great, you know, like sometimes it just makes you wonder how people can like go out of their way to like teach kids, I mean, just as a society, what we consider to be horrible, wrong things, you know. Like Sam and I have been super upset, like not to be like super like left softy, like not even like anti-gun conversation, but like everything that happened with all these school shootings recently. I think like as a parent, it's just like so fucking disturbing, man, because like you spend so much time with your kids close to you, like not even out of your eyesight, you know, like those formative years, like they're an arm's length away for most of their life, you know, especially more so I was raising my daughter through this pandemic, so it's not like we were going a lot of places, you know, when we were outside, it's kind of like, okay. But then at some point in a world that's not like this, I feel like there's still just anxiety with not being around your kid. You know, like my kids are at home right now, you know, they started their summer break. I know they're fine, but there's always this like kind of like anxiety when you're not around them. I think it's just like parental, you know.
It kind of brings more clarity into like tomorrow is not guaranteed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of like my perspective all through my life has kind of been like that, you know, like, oh, I won't get to see this age. I won't get to see that age. And then all of a sudden, like, you're at that age and it's like, wow, this is amazing.
Great, yeah.
You know, it's a good ride. That really every day of it, you have to appreciate it.
Not having kids and trying to have kids now.
So it's kind of interesting. I mean, like, again, like we were talking about, there's a lot of conversations to have now about having kids, you know, like talking to your partner about like, okay, can you have kids? Do you want to have kids? Like a lot of those things. God, I got to think of like another word, children. Kids seems like overplayed now. But I don't know, like even imagining having kids now, like Sam and I have talked about, like, do we want to have a third child? And, you know, there's things that like now we have to discuss with our doctors as far as like, you know, can you have kids? You know, like there's kind of like a workup to it, you know? And I don't know, I just think it's kind of like everybody like takes it as a given, like even like the assumption like, oh, I'm going to have kids. And like our generation has even had like a big movement to like just not. Like a lot of people are like, why? You know, it's like pretty fucked up world for, you know, wherever you stand on a lot of issues. I think everybody can agree there's a lot of things that are pretty screwed up. You know,
so how do you guys remain hopeful?
I think you can't let it get to you. You know, you can't help but think about these things, but at the same time, you prepare your kids. Like I was saying, I feel like if I were to step out of the room, my son has enough thought or like kind of critical analysis. I trust his inner monologue, to put it that way. You know, I think I don't have to be a voice in the room to be not a voice in his head, but, you know, for him to understand some of the lessons that I taught him. And like, I think, you kind of like have these ideas of like a lot of it's going to be these very straightforward conversations, like, okay, sit down next to me and let's talk about some things, which some have, you know, but a lot it's just how you behave. Your kids study it and
Yeah.
they know it. And I feel like I've become a person that it's just really kind of like someone he can model himself after.
Yeah,
And
an example.
yeah, exactly. I'm sure our parents probably felt the same way, and there's always room for improvement, you
Mhm.
know? Yeah, but I feel like a good example. There was this thing on TikTok, like it almost made me cry when I saw it, but it was basically saying that the person you are is who you needed as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I really feel like I've become that person for everybody.
For
You know,
yourself,
not even
even, right?
yeah.
For yourself, your kids,
Yeah.
anyone, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, I was gonna say for myself, but I think it's for everybody. You know, like you should be the brightest version of yourself possible. You know, and I think like I just feel like I've become I don't know. You wear a lot of hats, but ultimately I've become a good version of myself. You know, I wouldn't even say a good father. You know, a good employee, a good husband. Like I feel like I'm a good person. I'm the person I want to be, and I just want to keep building that, you know. And obviously there's stumbling along the way, but I think that self-awareness of like, okay,
Yeah.
if there was something I didn't like, what do I do to make it better?
Yeah.
You know, or like kind of like I think we all kind of like have these embarrassing moments where like they just live in your head forever after that, and a lot of them are like totally inconsequential, like, oh, that was an awkward handshake when I met somebody, like, oh god, we'll never be the same, you know. You know, a lot of it's inconsequential, but there are also really defining moments where it's like, well, why did I do that? You know, why
Right.
did I act that way? Why did I say that? And I feel like I've had enough of like those experiences that now those stumbles are less frequent. It's kind of like learning how to walk.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, walking is a good analogy. You know,
Yeah.
you
Not stumbling as much.
exactly. Yeah, you just stumble a lot less, but there's some things you can't help. You know, you can't avoid. I don't know, like who put this wall here? Yeah, I think it's important to be like a genuine good version of yourself. I mean, especially, I wouldn't even say kids, but just like the people in your life, they pick up on it. You know, like I think some of like my most regrettable moments are just realizing when I wasn't nice to like people I wanted to be nice to, or like it matters to be nice to everybody, but like your parents are a great example of like, man, you know, if I could take back all the times I said mean things to someone just genuinely trying to take care of me, you know, I don't know, I would take them all back, you know.
Yeah. Well, Mario, I'm having a hard time coming up with a freaking title for this episode.
I know, we're all over the
Freaking
place,
all
right?
over the place, and I love it.
You're gonna have to do like snippets, like this
I
is where we
love
talk
it.
about this.
I love it. Believe it or not, we're at a little over 2 hours, buddy.
Really, I feel like we've just kind of been vibing.
That's the point. This is my excuse to catch up with people.
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome because it just feels very like organic.
Yeah.
You know, like I honestly just feel like we're chilling and like, dude, this has to like be like therapy for you. Like, I'm sure you just leave here. Well, I'm gonna leave here like on a cloud. So I'm sure you're just like, I'm jealous you take this in all the time.
Yeah. No, it's been quite a ride, and I'm glad I stuck with it. I'm trying to, dude. June. This is probably like my fourth or fifth in June. It's like,
Damn.
usually it's 2 per month, and
Yeah.
I have a backlog of I'm running out of memory on my computer kind of thing.
Damn.
So, but I can honestly say this has probably been like one of the more fulfilling episodes. And the other one that came to mind
happy
a while
to be
ago,
a part of that.
right, is like Mason was like a very fulfilling episode for him to share his experience. But yeah, is there? I mean, if you want to be found, you can plug yourself if you want. Otherwise,
I don't want to be found.
if you know what, that's cool too. That's fine.
I think there was a point in my life where like I would like to be found, but now it's kind of like
It's
well,
whatever.
Well, what am I getting for it? What are you
No,
getting
I
for
know.
it? Nothing but trouble. Leave me alone.
Well, guys, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in the next episode.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope to be back. I would love to do this with like a group, just like
I swear to God, back when this first started, I was like, Alex and Marty, you should come on, give thoughts on beer, like help people navigate beer. And he's like, drink what you like. That's it. I'm like,
just like
"Fuck you,
golden
Alex."
advice.
hope you listen to that.
That's
but-
always his thing. He's like, "Do you like that?"
Good,
Yeah,
that's it.
good. That's good
Keep-
beer.
Keep it simple.
Yeah,
Keep it simple.
yeah.
All right, guys. Till the next one.
Peace.